Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Davis, and you're watching Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my sponsors, Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print. I know printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. From their instant quote calculator to let you get as many quotes as you want for free, to their 24-hour customer service support, Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And right now, you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials. And the company has also printed so many successful Kickstarter campaigns. A bunch of them you have even heard about on this very show. And I know one that is actually coming out in a few weeks that has used Bixum, but I can't say anything else about it. It's sort of super secret. And they currently offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK. Bixum can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to Mixum.com. And right now, listeners of my show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get a 5% discount on their first order. So that is mixam.com. Again, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of your current order to receive a 5% discount. And I also have a sponsorship deal with BCW Supplies, where you can use my code POPAnimeComics to get 10% off your order. And I know, and I'm sure my guest knows, that bags and boards are expensive. Every percentage point counts. So please feel free to use that, and you can use that as many times as you want when you're ordering your supplies. So without further ado, and I might get his name wrong, and he's going to correct me, I know it, I have with me comic creator and writer Josh Pantalleresco, I want to say.
You got it. You got it. Well, you got it. You did it.
Oh, thank God. Thank God. Yeah. I'm like all nervous. I'm not functioning. And I'm like, oh, man, I'm going to get the name wrong even if you told me. It's just one of those things. But welcome to the show.
Yeah. Do you mind having some fun, do like a fun little introduction just to myself here, just to introduce myself? You mind if I do that?
What?
I want to do a fun little introduction for myself. Just you want to hear it? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Andrew Mecca Davis's show. And I am the guest, Joshua Pantalleresco, writer, podcaster, broadcaster, comic creator, poet, and lots of other stuff I do too. And I'm thrilled to be here on Pop Anime Comics. How was that, buddy?
That works for me. You know, it's a very informal show here. Yeah. And obviously, I was on your show a few weeks ago, and then you asked to be on mine, and I was happy to have you on, and I was thankful that I was on your show. And so I figured I'd return the favor. And you have right now a book that's out where it can be ordered on Amazon. I believe I put the link in the description down below or up above, depending on where you're watching, which is Alice 1. So what is the basic premise of this book for those who are hearing about it for the first time? Because it is a very interesting book, and we're going to get into it, I promise.
So I decided to mash up, what if Alice in Wonderland opened Pandora's box? And that's literally the whole concept, because it occurred to me that Alice and Pandora are essentially the same story. Alice follows the right rabbit into the rabbit hole. Pandora's curiosity compels her to a box. So in my story, Alice opens Pandora's box and gets a certain Cheshire friend inside her head and also her shadow and maybe some other places too. And in this story, Alice is chasing, in Alice 1, Alice is chasing the Queen of Hearts, and the Queen goes over the edge of the world, and Alice follows her into the Greek underworld. And there, she has to probably play the most interesting game of croquet ever against Jason of the Argonauts. And that's the basic plot of the story.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we're going to dive into. And
sure.
So I am super curious before we get into that, because obviously Alice in Wonderland has been done 15 ways from Sunday, I think it's safe to say. Obviously, every major publisher, every major writer to some degree has either mashed it up or has done a reference to it. I'm a huge Zenescope fan, and they have their version of Wonderland. But you threw Greek mythology into it, which I don't know if that was ever done before. So where did that idea even come from? Because it is a very different interpretation of it and mixing things up and adding a new spin onto the entire world of Alice.
So it comes from two parts. One involves a bar and another one. So I'll go with the first part though. Originally, the idea behind it first came to my head as so there was a Lewis Carroll anthology about 4 years ago that Colleen Anderson, an editor, a poet, like she loves my poetry style. And as a result, she requested that I do a Lewis Carroll inspired poem for her collection. So that's the first part. So I was originally asked to do it. Now, where it got interesting was I was like, well, like you, like, what the hell am I going to say about Lewis Carroll that hasn't already been said? So I go to a bar that night. I'm not kidding. I go to a bar that night and I meet this girl. She has a Gorgon tattoo on her shoulder, right? She's cute. I hit on her. She plays for the other team. It's all good. We're still good. Actually, truth story, we're still really good friends. She's an amazing human being, incredibly talented artist in her own right. We clicked as friends. It was great. But she had this Gorgon tattoo, and I looked at her because she was just such a cool person. It's like, I could put her in my story. And then the idea of Medusa in Alice in Wonderland, like, that could fit. That could totally fit in Wonderland. And as I was thinking about how it would fit, that's when it clicked to me. Alice is Pandora. They're the same story tree. It was like, and then it just all clicked. And suddenly I had a very cool interpretation of Wonderland and Greek mythology that I could play with. And that's why the Alice book evolved into what it was.
Yeah, and it's very, very interesting because obviously I'm a huge anime fan, and one of the things that I just watched about 6 months ago was Pandora Hearts, which is dealing with Alice in Wonderland and sort of the character who is not Alice, but is sort of looks like Alice and acts a little bit like Alice, gets thrown down, and obviously sort of dealing with Pandora's box and the pluses box and all that stuff. And so it's such an interesting thing because this just seems so obvious, and I haven't really seen many things that do that. And it's also very interesting because it's also very much in poem form. And yeah, I mean, there's pictures in it. I'm trying to give a selling point here. Yeah. I'm the interviewer trying to give talking points.
Okay, I'll shut up. I'll be the pretty one for a second here. I'll be the pretty one for a second.
So, I mean, it's all poems, all joking aside, and that's something it's a very long form poem. Mm-hmm. And so what was that like writing it in this way? Because that's a whole different interpretation as well in this, where we now have, not just the traditional Alice in Wonderland. We don't have an Alice in Wonderland comic, but we have a poem and almost like a ballad in a lot of ways.
So this isn't the first time I've done this style. My traditional publishing career, believe it or not, was this. I accidentally wrote a poem like this a long time ago called The Watcher. And I accidentally got it published through Mirror World Publishing. It was like one of those it was one of those meant to be things. And when I was a kid, I would read Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner. I read The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. I read Calvin Miller's Singer Song Finale trilogy. And I thought it was such an interesting way to tell the story. And I would have to be, if I had to pick one, it would be Calvin Miller would be the biggest influence on this. Because Calvin has something very similar where he did pictures with poem. And I really like that format. And it's just like, I would love to do that someday. So when I did The Watcher years ago, that's when I finally did it. And it wasn't something I planned. It kind of just happened. But I had something there and I decided to keep going with it. And so again, that's how. So when I went and did Alice, Colleen, the editor for that anthology, had read my style with The Watcher, Storm Dancer, and The Wandering God. That whole trilogy. So I have experience. What made this one different though was the cat. The Cheshire Cat is inside her head. So I thought, what would be a very clever way to do dialogue without always going like to the traditional dialogue boxes, right? And I thought, so the cat talks in parentheses, and I thought that's a clever like way of having their interaction, and also makes Alice just a touch insane because she doesn't know where she's going, and madness is a big part of Wonderland. And one of the big things about the story is I wanted this about remembering who you are, and I think that's the early part of this. So every time she gets a piece of Wonderland, when you read it, she would remember something that she did not know before.
Yeah, it's very interesting because there's a lot of stuff being played here where obviously Wonderland, as I was stating, is very much been turned upside down, reimagined, referenced in almost everything at this point. I mean, the amount of animes that Wonderland has been referenced in, and even the memory side of things, and knowing who you are and going on the adventure, and then is clearly, I mean, I could count hundreds of them very easily. And I'm sure you can think of at least 10 off the top of your head. Um, but even going further, this is also where that is dabbling with the insanity of her, because Alice in Wonderland is sort of coming in and out of insanity, and depending on how you read it, how you interpret it. And obviously, I read this, and I read all 87 pages of it, and there's really that dialogue, and I don't know how St. Alice is in this, and what was that really like touching upon her, because it showed Alice in a very new light, yeah, at least to me. And I'm not too sure if I like that Alice. No offense.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's not supposed to be quite your Alice in Wonderland. Not the one you remember anyway, right? It's someone that, like you said, the first book, Alice Zero, which I ended up getting rejected for the anthology. So but I still published the first short one called Alice Zero.
So talk about that for a second with the anthology, because I don't know if I know that. What happened with all of the anthology stuff with Alice Zero?
So here's what happened. So Colleen, once she got my story, I was one of the last stories cut. But when it comes, sometimes anthologies, and this is something you have to accept as an author, no matter what field you're in. Sometimes even when you are asked to do a piece, it might not fit the final collection. This didn't. To Colleen's credit, she goes to me, "You have something here. You should do something with it." So it just so happened. So another one of those magical happening moments. I used to play a Magic the Gathering locally in Calgary. I did a competitive thing, and I remember playing this guy by the name of Vlad, who was a really good player. I think he handed me my ass that day. I don't remember that, but he handed me my butt. And I met his girlfriend, Kenzie Carr, who would become the artist of the Alice series that we're doing. We met, and we just talked. We maintained a friendship, and then what happened was she pretty much. When I was looking for an illustrator for this, she talked herself into being the illustrator for this. She talked herself, and she really wanted to do it. She had all these great ideas, and I was just like, she's into this, so let's just play with it. And so I worked with her. So she did Zero. I released Zero last year. This year it was nominated for the Elgin Award from the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association. It was nominated, didn't win. But it was basically the same thing. She opens the box. She wakes up in an insane asylum, and the playing cards are her jailers, which I thought was a really fun take on the playing cards. So that was the first book, but again, it's just taking what was originally asked of me, and then but I thought about it. It's like, where do I want to go with the story? What's the story actually about, and how do I mish and mash these characters? And I realized that this version of Alice that opened this box and caused this great calamity to befall on herself and the world would not have it all together. That's a huge thing to be responsible for, right? This isn't like Alice falling in a rabbit hole. This is Alice opening the thing that released all the evils in the world. And then she has a cat that's needling her from the inside, just pushing her buttons every so often because she can. And I think that's I love that dynamic between them. And honestly, that was the super fun thing about it, because the cat knows more than Alice does at this point in time. And that's the cat's more aware. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And some of them I'm not going to say here because I got more Alice to write. But
it's very interesting because it also creates a bunch of questions, a bunch of psychological questions, a bunch of who can you trust, what is the role of the Cheshire Cat in this, or I think it's Eris or Iris. I think we could say the name. That's not spoiler.
Yeah. No, that's not a huge spoiler.
And so it's really this idea that now you're playing a lot of games of chess. It's kind of like, Alice might be playing checkers, but the Cheshire Cat's playing chess a little bit. And it's a very interesting dynamic. And then it's also how much you rely on, the cat to tell you what and who's the cat working for, or what's the cat's objective. And a lot of stuff's going on. So there's a lot of psychological stuff and a lot of, dare I say, politicking, if you will.
Kind of. Well, so one of the other little subtle themes of the story is shadows, right? It's one of the little subtle themes of the story. So the idea is there's a conscious and there's a subconscious. So this is one interpretation. It's not the only one, but it's the one interpretation. So one could argue that Alice is having a conversation with her unconscious mind the whole time. That right? One can make that interpretation in this story. There are other interpretations though, but this is just one I'm just going to put out there just for shits and giggles. So if you could hear I do, like I said, as a creative, I talk to myself all the time. I just want this little things get their juices flowing and whirling. And I just recognize the fact that, to the outside looking in, that looks absolutely fucking crazy. But what's real to that person is not necessarily what's real to me. And same thing with you. How you see the world is how you see the world. I do not have that point of view. How I see the world is how I see the world. I don't have that point of view. So from the outside looking in, it might seem crazy. But the other part of it too is we're all a little crazy. So why not just,
no. It's the ones who think they're not crazy are the craziest of them all.
Mm-hmm. Oh, probably. I almost, normal scares me. Normal always scares me. So I'm perfectly normal. I'm running for the hills as fast as I can.
Oh, no. I've learned. The people who are out there and don't act normal are the ones who are successful, are the ones who are running things, are the ones who are getting things done. And the ones who say, oh, I'm normal. I mean, you scare me because it is not good to be normal, because those are the ones that are out there the most.
Well, I'll put it to you like this. I can't judge sanity. I'm not qualified to do that, but I will go with one of my favorite quotes. One of my favorite TED Talks is why you will fail to have a great career. And one of the things I've said about I'm a perfectly normal person. Well, the guy that talked that, of course, said perfectly normal people have no passion. And he's right. They have no passion. And that's terrifying to someone like me.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I always look for the outliers. I'm not interested in somebody who doesn't have a vision or doesn't have a sense of where they want to go, because those people to me are like a lake that just stays still. And one of my favorite visuals that I like to get into people's head is that if a body of water stays still, nothing grows in a body of water that stays still, and nothing moves in it, and nothing is attracted to it. And then algae is the only thing that after years of that staying still will grow.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a swamp. And swamps are not fun. But we're not talking about swamps. We're talking about Alice.
Mm-hmm, we are. So what else would you like to know?
I don't know. So she didn't have a bad diving down the rabbit hole, perhaps?
No. Actually, no. I'm not going to spoil. I'm not going to spoil what really is going on here. I'll leave it to your imagination. Let's just say. Sorry.
No. I'm sorry. I was just making a really bad joke because I have a very different interpretation of Alice in Wonderland.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very different interpretation. I think she found out that her father was really doing some cocaine, and she got it. She didn't know what it was, and that's what spun the entire thing downward.
So I mentioned Carl Jung. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of drug binge stuff, especially when you look at Eat Me, Drink Me. There's definitely something to be said about that little reference. But the way I did this story, and by the way, in Al Zero, Eat Me and Drink Me do show up. They are drugs. They're either out there, they're psychotropic drugs to keep her mellow. That's what they are. That's in the first book. But I mentioned Carl Jung. Carl Jung is a big part of my interpretation of the story. So if you understand what Carl Jung terms in terms of dreams and metaphors and the subconscious, you can kind of see where a little bit where I'm going with this.
I've a pretty interesting idea because obviously I read it and I'm just joking when I'm going down the drug reference with that. But obviously you take a different approach, and then you obviously even go further in book 2 into Greek mythology, where now we're really starting to face foes and stakes are getting higher and the temperature in the room's increasing because, obviously she's sort of not playing a life and death game a lot of the way, looking for, the queen.
Yeah.
And it's this idea that, what was that like? Because she escapes from her captors and quote unquote the mental institution that she's in. And now she's in the underworld of Greek mythology and sort of figuring out what's going on. And that's a big shift in scene. And in a lot of ways, I felt that it opened up the entire story, like more into an infinite position, where the story very much, just to give a visual, started like this, and now it's like that. And what was that like? Because isn't that in a lot of ways, depending on the writer, could be the greatest thing ever, or could be a curse in a lot of ways?
So I'll say, I won't go into full details about this. When I came up with the world, quote unquote, most fantasy series have what they call a world map. And I came up with this idea of doing a Snakes and Ladders board game as the world map for this world. Came into my head. I thought it was a really cool thought. It's like, okay, how do you play this game? I actually asked that question out to the universe. And the moment I asked that question, all the rules kind of came into my head. I came up with a really interesting take on Snakes and Ladders. And so this story also ties into the game I built as well. So there's a little bit of that going on too. It's not just telling a great story for the book, but also telling a great story that fits into the game, the role, and what the game's all about and going forward. And chasing the queen made sense on a couple different levels. The queen was the head warden in the asylum in Zero. So she felt again tortured for years. You'd be a little pissed too. But the other part is I know, like, I mashed up all the Greek mythology characters with the Wonderland characters in some form or fashion, with a couple of exceptions. And for the queen, I'm not spoiling who the queen is. The queen very much is true to her Greek counterpart. And as far as the cat is also a Greek character. I'll give you like the Mad Hatter is Kronos, the god of time. Why? They both kill time. It was just like a perfect little mashup that can go there. I saw their common thread, and I kind of went with it. Same thing. Like I'm imagining the characters. So the queen, I thought, considering what Alice's real purpose is a great antagonist for her, but also to some degree a distraction. One of the big questions you could make an argument is Alice did not have to go down the road she chose, but she chose it anyway. And that's why she chose to, she follows the queen down another rabbit hole into the Greek underworld, where Jason of the Argonauts awaited her. So
yeah, it's very interesting. There's a lot of questions.
Sure.
And I don't have a lot of questions. I mean, I do have a lot of questions, but for the sake of this, is that there's a lot of questions on why Alice is choosing to go down into the belly, why she's going after the queen, what exactly, because I'm under the presumption, and correct me if I'm wrong, that after the queen fled, Alice could have had her freedom. Yes. If she wanted to. And that raises a whole bigger issue. And obviously, I don't know how far we're going to, and when we're going to get that answer, because we don't have that answer yet. And there's hopefully a reason why. And if I know you and you're the writer that I think you are, at some point we're going to get that answer.
Well, I can tell you why she chose to chase the queen, right? Because that was in the book. So I can actually say that answer. She was hurt by the queen. The question then becomes with someone like Alice, though, is there a point when you can forgive? That's the only thing I'm not going to give an answer to this question, because right. But people hurt us. People hurt us. Sometimes they don't mean to. Sometimes they do. And either way, but either way, it doesn't matter. People hurt us. We have a tendency as people to hold on to to our hurts. Alice is no different than anybody else. She too holds on to her hurts. But maybe somewhere along the line, maybe she'll be forced to let them go. The cat chides her a little bit about this too in the story.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here. It's a very interesting web we weave. It is a really good quote to utilize for this thing. And there's a reason why I'm trying not to spoil too much, because once we pull one thread, the rest is gonna fall.
Fair enough. Like I said, I'm not reluctant. Like, I don't feel that is a really.
No, I'm trying to sell your book.
I know. They can go sell my book. They can go listen. I think they got it. Like I love, like, honestly, I love talking about my I love this because I had so much fun writing this. Like, you
don't get to talk about your book on the other side. That's why this is fun.
Yeah.
So, because it's really interesting because I actually enjoyed it, and I sat down and I read it, and then certain parts I had to read twice. I'm like, what's going on here? And it took me like a minute to get that the cat is in her head, and obviously, the parentheses, and then I'm like, oh, it made sense, and then like the third or fourth time you see it, you're like, right on the third or fourth page, you're like, oh, now I get it, what's going on here. And she's talking to herself, and then also there leaves a lot of imagination on what you can imagine Alice to look like. Because while we do have pictures here, we also we have few of them in between. And so it's very interesting in that regard as well when you're reading it in that fashion. So it's very, very interesting. But even going further, because obviously you did match things up with Greek mythology, and I am by no means a Greek mythology expert. I know very little about Greek mythology. And so I'm curious what drew you even to Greek mythology, because I know a little bit more, because I'm more on like into history. And like I love history. I love ancient history and all sorts of stuff. And I love like African history, especially like the Mamluks and the Janissaries. Like that's like my jam. Like I love that stuff. And so what was this like, really bringing in Greek mythology? Because I know who the Titans are. I know who the Greek gods are. But beyond that, I know very little. So for me, you bringing all this stuff up, it's kind of cool because I'm like, oh man, I don't know what this is. I should go Wikipedia.
Yeah, there's a lot of well, again, I would not have thought of it if I hadn't met that girl at the bar. Never would have thought of it in a million years. But once I did, when I was first starting as a writer, I made it a kind of a point to look at the mythology. Mythology is a good way to build your story foundations. So for me, it was Greek, a little bit of Norse because I was a big fan of the Thor comic book, but it was just also reading the mythology of the characters, and it gives you a good foundation for building stories. And the Greeks were always interesting to me because gods and heroes, as we know them, are very often not what they seem. Take Medusa. Okay, Medusa in mythology, right, is very much a victim. You can make a very strong argument that she was a big giant victim in her circumstances, but she's a monster. Is she a monster because she's the weak? Is she a monster because she's the victim? Is Jason a hero because of everything he does, because he wins, or because he's favored by the gods, and that's it? This is only redeeming quality. So, and that kind of makes you question, and again, it's one of those things that makes you question what's going on with the gods. And so when I have Wonderland, where I can take all of this and kind of flip it upside down in some really fun and interesting ways, and that's the cool thing about the Greek myths, is you can twist them in all sorts of interesting ways, and it could be a lot of fun. It was fun playing with Jason's mythology in the story. I did that quite a bit, and it was super fun to do. But the material was right there, and it added a very neat layer to this version of Wonderland.
Yeah, and even to go further into that, because this is actually super interesting. What is that like? Because you do have a lot of source material to play with, but you also have Wonderland in there too. So you have a lot of source material from Greek mythology, and you have stuff from Wonderland. And then where do you even find the balance for, I guess, mashing the two up and modifying and bending? Because I don't know if this is the right way, but I don't think you broke any of the rules in any of these characters on either side. But there's a lot of bending and reshaping of characters and really hitting both sides to it, because obviously I know Wonderland a lot more. And I recognize the Wonderland side of this stuff a lot more, not because I don't think the Greek mythology stuff was there, but I definitely think that it's just what I know is Wonderland. But I don't think you like broke any of the rules. So what was that like really figuring out? Because it is a nice balance, because you've seen mashups that don't work. And I've seen mashups that don't work, and we've seen mashups that do work in a lot of ways.
So what I look for, okay, I mentioned the Mad Hatter and Kronos earlier. I'm going to mention this up front. So what I did there was I looked at what the Mad Hatter is. And again, I also had this idea of what's going. I'm not spoiling the uber plot of what's going on with Alice, but in terms of fitting the story I'm telling, I looked at the Mad Hatter. I'm like, what does he do? He sits on his butt and he kills time. What's the Greek equivalent of that? And I thought, Kronos is fun. Kronos is the god of time. That's an interesting take on the god of time, especially considering Kronos does go a little mad at the end of his story when he's devouring his kids. So it's like, that's an interesting take on Kronos. And it works because I looked at both characters and what they fit. What do they have in common? So I use that common thread to build a story, right? Anything from the flamingos, how I use the flamingos in this story. What did I do? I looked at, I was like, is there a Greek equivalent to this, right? And if there wasn't a Greek equivalent to it, I left it relatively alone, because again, if there's a tie, quote unquote a tie, right? They're just too different. The Wonderland side wins, because at the end of the day, it's an Alice story with a lot of Greek elements to it, right? But at the same token, so like Jason, for example, does not have a Wonderland equivalent. Medusa, the Gorgon Knight, does not have a Wonderland equivalent. What I decided to do is make them separate, right? But also, if I did that, without giving too many secrets away, there's a reason there's no Greek equivalent. There's no other equivalent on the other side. There's a reason for that. So that's so again, so what I would do is I needed the characters in the story. I needed them I use. There's a common thread to the story. There's a common thread both sides have. The Cheshire Cat and her Greek equivalent have the same thing in common. And it made me smile when I saw it. It's like, this is perfect. This is just way too fucking perfect. And then, characters I'm introducing. No, I cannot tell you how surprisingly easy these connections were to make once I saw it. Like, once I saw the Wonderland Greek mythology mashup, it almost like it did it itself. All I'm doing is just trying not to mess it up.
Yeah, isn't that interesting when you get like a great idea in your head and then it just works and you're like, oh my God, this is just so perfect. And the way I describe it is that I had a panel, and it's a good panel I've done, where I've compared The Walking Dead to Fahrenheit 451 to Attack on Titan. Mm-hmm. And what I figured out is that if you put them on top of each other, more things match up in all the right places than they don't. And it's one of those things where you're just like, oh my God, like this is so equivalent, and there's so many things just working in tandem so well, and there's so many coincidences, and there's so many ideas that are the same. And then when the ideas aren't the same is, on certain things. And there's just so many connections, and it's just one of those kind of cool things that you see. And it's just like, oh man, when I spot it, I'm like, I got to build the panel on this. And I have that panel, and it's a really well sought out panel when I go to anime and comic cons. So we were like, this is kind of cool. And then people leave, they're saying, oh man, I never even saw that. And then I've had people shoot me emails, be like, I was thinking about this. And so what is that moment like for you when you're like, oh man, I just found the entire thing? It's just like, how come nobody's ever done something like this before? Because that was my question when I figured out my panel. Because I then looked up, anybody ever do any of this, like what my panel idea before? And it was like, no. And I'm like, why? This seems so obvious.
But that's the beauty of it, though. Sometimes simple things are the hardest things to see. And when you know they're simple. Like I look at, so one of the simplest concepts of all time is Tetris, the video game. One of the simplest concepts you'll ever see. It's brilliant. That music is going to be in my head forever, just forever, right?
But it's that and the DK rap from Super Smash Brothers Melee.
That's right. Okay, DK rap, Super Smash Brothers, cool. But for me, it's just the Tetris theme. Just it's there, but it's also just the game is simple. But that's why it works, right? It's so simple, and the guy who came up with it's a genius. Because again, it's not. We have a tendency as people to look for giant, complex connections, but that's actually not how the world works. The world's a bunch of simpler connections, and it's that willingness to see those things. So for me, when I get like one of these like eureka moments where I figure stuff up like this, I actually get really. First off, I get kind of excited. It's like that joy of discovery, euphoria. And if I do look to see if anyone else has done it, but not so much because I want to like beg, borrow, steal, or claim I'm an original, because I have no idea. There's 7 billion people in the world. I have no idea how original I really am. But what I am looking at is, I came up with something. Now, what can I bring to the table for this idea? What do I care about here? And then I put that together, and suddenly I have a really fun, wonderful, creative, interesting idea that ties together really well. And I thought, I got something, and it's solid, and it's awesome. And that, yeah, I love that stuff. I'm a creative. I love being creative like that. When I make that kind of stuff, all my stuff, I try to do that a little bit.
Yeah, no, because for me, I get very excited when I'm like, oh man, like now I get to share this out, and now I get to actually influence the subject matter. Like one of my favorite things with my panel, and I'm curious how you feel about this, is that I got to influence 2 pieces of work that were very much pop culture works, and that people were coming and then they changed the way they thought and saw Attack on Titan and The Walking Dead. And then obviously Fahrenheit 451 has been around for over 50 years now. But even people are like, oh man, what is Fahrenheit 451? Which I was a little bit shocked because I thought it was a pretty well-read book. But, you know, when I pull the audience and say, hey, how many of you know Attack on Titan? And everybody's hand goes up, and everybody's hand goes up for The Walking Dead. And then there was like 5 people the first time I did this who knew Fahrenheit 451. I'm like, that's kind of crazy to me. But it was cool for me because now I get to change the way you see this work. I get to make your brain think a little bit. And I don't know if that's what you feel when with your books that are out there, because my brain is definitely viewing, you know, Alice in Wonderland slightly different now. And
so, what I try to do with people is I love surprising them. Like I just love. So my first review for this book, but it was a friend of mine, Joe Compton, he reviewed it, and he said to me in the book, it's like, this book sneaks up on you. It's literally how he said it. Like, it sneaks up on you. What you expect and what you get are not the same thing, but it's such a wild ride that it's like, enjoy it. I want to surprise you. I want to challenge your conceptions of what you see and think. And then, but I want to surprise you. I want to take you on a journey. And when you come out of it, you've thought about things in a different way. And I do that with everything I do. I try to, because again, it's so easy to get caught up with like the common thought or narrative. More often than not, that common thought or narrative is not that interesting at all to me. What's more interesting is, okay, let's really look at this and see if I can come up with a new way of doing it. It's funny you mentioned Fahrenheit 451, because my next project is a retelling of that, where I'm writing and drawing it.
It's a lot of interesting things about Fahrenheit 451.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's my all-time favorite book. It's the only book that's ever scared me.
That book didn't scare me. 1984 terrified me.
I read Fahrenheit first, then I read 1984. I was a little too young for 84. I read Fahrenheit when I was 15, and I could see that world perfectly.
See, maybe it's that I'm too much of a warrior and I'm too much of a fighter. That Fahrenheit 451 didn't scare me. Also, I couldn't really get the idea where, like, it didn't scare me when I read it because I'm like, I'm not like connecting necessarily. Like the thought of controlling of ideas, I thought was a little bit scary, but I also thought that was just government manipulation. I also but the dog didn't scare me in that. I'm like,
it wasn't the dog. It wasn't the dog. The idea that people would stop listening and stop being empathetic to each other frightens me a lot more. That's because these are the same little things that matter in life. Okay, so just today, we'll go back, but we'll come back and then I'll talk about.
Oh, please.
Yeah. So just today, I taught somebody how to swear in French. I got my podcast taken over by a 3-year-old, right? And it was fun. Like, a 3-year-old took over my podcast. We interviewed the mom. She took it over. I wrote about Medusa. I talked to some people in town, got to know some of the town where I'm living in Canmore right now, getting myself more familiar with the people and the places and stuff like that. And it's kind of cool making myself more acclimated to the town. All of which to say is these are just little simple things. That's the shit that makes life worth living for, man. The fact that I taught my friend a dirty word, it's like, and just the reaction on her face when I did, like, I made her laugh. It's like, that's what life's about. In Fahrenheit 451, you could literally see like what that book was really about. It's not about the hound. It's not even about the books burning, although that in itself was terrifying for a bunch of different reasons. It was the fact that there was a deliberate attempt, you could literally see, to crush the human spirit. And you can see the human spirit rebelling against us in a bunch of little things. In 1984, most people forget this. It was originally written as a comedy, a parody, right? And then, right, the Index is far scarier and more than the story.
Oh man, see, I have a different interpretation. Totally. So I know a lot about Fahrenheit 451 because Fahrenheit 451 was written in a library, and originally was a short novella that was 25,000 words, give or take. And then basically, Bradbury's, his editor was like, "Bro, we need it long." He was like, "Fine, screw this." And he wrote it because, and then he went back and added another like 25,000 words to it, give or take. So then it became what it is. And also the whole thing of Fahrenheit came out from, Bradbury was walking home and a cop gave him a hard time and was like, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, sir, I'm walking." And the cop gave him a hard time. And he was like, "I'm going to show you." And he wrote something called the Samaritan. And so my entire interpretation of Fahrenheit 451 was not people not listening. It was that they're giving the entire community information to control, how they think and what they think. And I compare this to Attack on Titan, where every 50 years they're erasing the people's memories, which is, limiting the information to affect and wean them in. So I took Fahrenheit 451 as the idea of censorship of ideas. But I even thought to myself saying, look, ideas are always naturally going to crawl out, and they do. And in a lot of ways, Fahrenheit 451 to me is a very triumphant position. The reason why 1984 scared the shit out of me, and I read, I think I read Fahrenheit, either in 9th grade, so probably around the same time you read it. But the reason why 1984 is I read it on my own, and I'm like, wait a second, government's spying on me? And I'm like, wait a second, there's this big thing that I don't know what it is that's sort of spying on me, and I don't know who's working for it and who's not, and I might say something and then I might be 86th. So that's what I viewed it very differently, where I'm like, wait a second, there's another force that can take me out way more because I didn't feel the government was in Fahrenheit 451. And maybe it's just the way I think, but it's such an interesting thing because that terrifies me. And fast forward, looking back, and I mean, this is 10 years ago probably for me, I'm saying to myself, like, oh my God, like, I'm even more terrified in 1984 now.
So, 2 or 3 different minds on this. So for me, there is a police force in Fahrenheit 451, although it's not overtly said. It's the fire department, and that they're the government officials that you see in the story. But the index is probably the most interesting thing. The story's okay. 1984, the story is really, really good. But the index is so much more interesting to me because it talks about the rules of language. Orwell, if you want to get really depressed, read his political essays. Those are depressing as hell. But this is a very experienced, they are so depressing. And unfortunately, more often than not, accurate. That is a man that understood how politics and ideas work and how they work ultimately against each other. The more political, the more government gets into a system, the less ideas are freely flown. Just the way it is. But the idea that you could control a thought to the point where you can no longer express the idea is something that Orwell himself, that is the terrifying thing about 1984. Because no matter how big and bad and scary a government is, it is only as good as the people that are in it. If the head of your government is a senile, doddering fool, chances are the rest of the government is also a senile, doddering entity. If your government is honest, integral, and transparent, chances are no matter what the system actually is, you have a pretty good system. So it comes down, ultimately, all these things come down to people. So my thing has always been, okay, I've had every kind of person I can on the show I possibly can, and I listen to everybody. If I'm listening, I don't have to agree with everybody. In fact, I know for a fact people don't agree with everything I say.
We're already having a disagreement here about books, but that's okay. Let's just burn a book instead, and then we could agree on that, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. but the point is, I have a very live and let live attitude with everybody, and as such, people are allowed to express their opinions, and I like that. You learn more about the people you disagree with than the ones you absolutely agree with. What makes 1984 the most terrifying thing is everybody is forced to think the same thing. That's the terrifying thing about 1984, the truly terrifying thing. In Fahrenheit 451, the thing that terrified me is it's also the same idea in some ways. But the difference is you can still see that the ideas can still transmit no matter what. His wife, who's watching these giant, you want about prophetic dreams that come true, these giant ass televisions you see.
Hey. We're only halfway there. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Yeah. My TV is not the size of my entire wall yet.
Not yet. Close, but halfway, right? Halfway there. But like that idea was like Bradbury called that years ago. And the thing about that is, right, he was like, some ways he was a prophetic genius. But I also know this too, is giving people an opportunity, as long as we live in a world where everybody can express a thought freely without repercussion and discrimination, we are in a good place. The moment that is challenged, everything, and this is an old idea, and I know it's it's older than me, and it will outlive me too, right? But that's the thing about life, is as long as we create a world where people are free to be themselves and express their ideas, good, bad, or indifferent, without reclamation, and provided we don't hurt each other, we're got the freedom to do that. We're gonna always be in a good place. It's when those things are taken away.
Interesting discussion.
Yes.
Because definitely, I mean, Attack on Titan is way more 1984, and obviously Fahrenheit 451 is Fahrenheit 451, and so this is such an interesting idea, and obviously, you don't touch necessarily on 1984 and Fahrenheit 451 per se in, your Alice 1 book and the entire Alice series that you're writing, but you definitely dive into a lot of these topics and things like this. And I like the fact that you don't shy away from real adult conversations and questions that are presented in your work, because I think it's important in a lot of ways. And I guess my question is that because and obviously Ben just interviewed me and he asked something about diversity, and I'm curious how you feel about it, is that, I think that a lot of writers right now are terrified to really dive into deep questions and do deep thinking in their comics and writing, and they're shying away from it. And I don't know if you agree or disagree, and that's what he was getting at. And I'm kind of, I think, a little bit on the fence, because I know writers who are doing that in comics and novels and just thought process, but I know writers who are also very much shying away from that and just writing, a very action-paced series, superhero story, but nothing of real thought process.
Okay, so we're talking. Okay, I'm gonna quantify this just before we begin. Whatever.
I'm going to make one more. I'm not singling anybody out, and don't single anybody out in that way, because I don't want to attack anybody. But just the whole state of it, versus the just narrow selected few. But continue.
Okay, so first up, I think the first most important thing to say about this is no matter what, tell the story you want to tell. That's just advice. Just tell the story you want to tell. It doesn't have to. It does. You know what? You can have a wonderful piece of cotton candy, fun action thriller. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, the world needs more. And to be perfectly honest with you, the world does need a little bit more of that every so often. So if that's what you want to do, cool, no questions. But here's what I think. I think comics are an interesting medium in the sense that you don't have a lot of room for text. You have to show it, not tell it, especially in comics. So I look at a book like, for example, one of my favorite comics of the last few years, something like Saga. A lot of stuff in the background doesn't always come to the forefront. Grant Morrison dabbles with this a lot in a lot of his works too. He won't always overtly come out and say it, but he will show it. Right?
But Saga also shows a lot of stuff up front and center.
Oh no, totally. No. Saga doesn't pull no punches, but there's nuances to how you tell a story in comics. So I kind of harken it back to like old school science fiction. There's usually if a comic has a multitude of layers to it, sometimes they'll have a scenario. Then they'll have what they're really saying. And if you want to talk about like Alice, like what I'm caring about here, again, it's just someone trying to figure out who they are. That's where they're at right now, and that's what the story is about. So I ask big questions in the story because they're big questions that everybody at some point asks. So I kind of look at it like that's the story I want to tell. I love those old school science fiction, big question kind of stories. I love those. So that's what I'm writing. And whether it's poetry, whether it's comics, whether it's a novel, I'm writing those big question stuff, right? Because I'm not afraid to ask big questions. And you shouldn't be. But it's all about what kind of story you want to serve. So I think to answer your question, I think the question that first needs to be asked is what's the story they want to tell, first off. But assuming you're like what you're saying is true, it's very easy in today's environment to be worried about pissing somebody off. But if there's anything I've learned about the media in the last 10 years, right? It's okay if you are polarizing, you will get more attention, not less. So if you want people to be aware you're out there, be polarizing, be definitive, be passionate about what you believe in. And if you're afraid to do that, why are you expressing yourself? Same.
Yeah,
So
because I mean the way I view writing, and I like to because I write, obviously I have my website, and I've been taking a little bit of a break, but I like to push the line.
mhm.
And at some point, I'm going to write a comic or write a book or do something. Whether I sell a million copies, it's self-published, I get picked up by somebody. I don't know the answer because I can't predict the future. But it's the idea that whatever I want to write, I want to push the line. And I understand because that's what I believe writing is meant to do in a lot of ways. And I think that it's meant to push, thought process, push ideas, push what you could do with a story, and whatever that means for you. If you say, I want to create the most fluff, enjoyable, and the greatest fantasy land, and I want to push that and make it the best I can make it and see how far I can push a fantasy land, pushing the line doesn't mean you're going into controversial territory. But I think that as a writer, if you're not saying, I want to see how far I can push an idea out or push a story or push my world until cracks start showing up in my world, I don't know what you're doing, and maybe I have a different interpretation of writing per se. So if I create a world, and I'll use the world of Aragon, for instance, I want to write, and then if I'm that author, I want to say, look, how far can I push this story in this world? And then, in that draft, I would say, oh, maybe I took it 3 steps too far. But, that to me makes sort of sense as a writer. And I don't know, maybe I'm a different writer, maybe I'm a different entity, or even with a concept, I like to push concepts because I want to evolve them, if that makes any sense. And so I feel that, a lot of people are sort of scared to do that as well right now as writers.
So, well, I'm certainly not. You'll see that next year quite a bit, I promise you, as far as that goes. Um, it's more like this. The only question I would have for you, pardon me. The only question I have for you is this: does the concept serve the story you're trying to tell? If the answer is yes, go for it. If you're just pushing for the sake of pushing, you run the risk of. Have you ever read Ayn Rand?
Yeah.
Right,
I
remember
like
Atlas Shrugged? Atlas Shrugged, right? My favorite parts in the book have nothing to do with John Galt. I can't stand John Galt. But
most people can't, but that's
yeah. But okay, she has some great like the stuff when you're watching the downfall of the American system in her book. It's very apropos to like what communism did to Russia. I think it's a really interesting take on that. I think it's the best parts of their story. The preachiness of Galt like wrecks the story she's telling. She didn't really need to talk too much about him, to be honest. In fact, she didn't for most of the book, which I thought was a really interesting, ingenious choice. But the concept, she was pushing a philosophy. She took a good story and it evolved to the point where she was advertising a philosophy more than the story itself. Which is why, as much as there are parts of Atlas Shrugged I really enjoy, I can't say it's a great book. I can say it's a good book, but I can't say it's a great book.
So I enjoy the philosophy elements of it. I enjoy what it stands for. I enjoy what the ideas behind it, and obviously dealing with government and all that stuff. So I enjoy that elements of it, and I look past the idea of what is this story because I'm looking at the representation of what Atlas Shrugged is.
Yeah, but no, I get it. Like this is me strictly on an execution at this point in time, right? This is strictly an execution point. Whatever you say about objectivism is entirely your thing. I'm not here to pro or debate that.
Oh no, I think we're in agreement that Atlas Shrugged is not a good book.
Yeah,
the ideas in it are decent if you want to believe in what Ayn Rand was doing.
Yeah, but like I said, yeah, there's that's the part about concept stuff. It's as authors, run the really interesting temptations is we can build worlds, and that's great. Listen, I have a novel where I have a unicorn farting out advertisements rainbow style. Like I did that just for fun, right? I have those abilities to throw these little world building bits in there. But if the story isn't, if the characters in the story don't fit the story, what's the point? So that I'm at that point in my quote unquote writing career where what's the story I care about? I'm going to tell that story and I'm going to push it, but also push the ideas I think that are interesting. Like I said, we're talking about Alice dealing with her shadow, her subconscious. That is part of her story. Growing up, what she's willing to do, what she's not willing to do, responsibility, ownership. These are things in the book, but also another way. In another way, it's Alice playing a game with Jason, and that's the story I'm telling. So all that stuff serves that story, right? And that's the thing. So if your concepts fit the story you're telling, all of which to say, then you should push as far as you can. We live in an age now where people can experiment a lot. Like I have experimented a lot and tell stories in unique and different ways. Totally do that and totally kind of just stand out on your own, being that person. I think that's a great thing about today. We have that ability. The only advice I'd give an author, any kind of whatever medium you're getting into, does it serve the story you're telling?
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, I come from a very interesting world where I like to push things,
Sure.
and I don't like to push things for the sake of saying I can do this, but because obviously I want them to serve a purpose, but I also want to expand what can be done. You know, in everything that I do in my life, I always want to expand what can be done. So when somebody says something can't be done, I want to see if it can be. I want to figure out how to do something and push it because obviously I want growth. And that's just how I am. And maybe it's because I'm not a writer first and foremost, but I'm more into the business side of things. And that obviously that I come at this at such a different angle. And that's, I think, so interesting. And maybe, you know, because I haven't written a novel, I haven't written a comic, I've written articles, but my writing style is usually 700 words or less.
Yep. And I got a fair share of credits in that department myself, actually. So
I like to write short and sweet.
But there's great market for that too. I've written for magazines like and places like Writers Weekly. I'm Here with Magazine, Anime Herald. I've done that. I've also got Authors Magazine. I've done a couple other things too, like on spec. Like I love articles. They're great. I love pushing the envelope in terms of taking a concept of how far it goes. As I've gotten older and I've done this enough, I recognize that the story fundamentals have to be there to push those envelopes. But if they're there, go nuts.
And also unspoiled, because doing a presentation is different on what can be pushed with lines versus writing an article, because I can introduce a concept of explaining certain elements in, you know, an anime and how it lines up versus writing a book on it or even creating a story dealing with that stuff, because I tend to like to deal with, you know, things that are nonfiction versus fiction is kind of my jam, because I find that life is more interesting than fiction in a lot of ways.
I definitely agree with that. I totally agree with that. What I will say to that is, I love, like I do another show. And it's interesting because now I'm starting to play with the visual elements of the show, right? Because I realize it's all storytelling at the end of the day. It doesn't matter what the genre is.
Oh yeah,
it's telling a story, the best story you possibly can. Whether you got a 30-second ad, or you got a 15-minute show, or you got, like, you know, my podcast where I just talk forever and ever and ever because I have a big mouth, right? But they're all telling stories.
I mean, look at, I love ClickFunnels and I love funnels and I love Funnelytics. Like, I love that. And that is hook, story, offer. And, you know, you have a hook, you have an offer, you have a story. But sometimes you might want to put the story first, you put the hook in the middle, and you put the offer in there different at the end. Or I've seen funnels and they've gotten me with things. They throw the offer first, and that becomes the hook. Then you have the hook, which just reconfirms the offer, and then you have the story afterwards because you're trying to convert, and it's just a way of what you're playing with. And so I've seen it done in every which way. And it's kind of like, for instance, I'm into comic book investing. People say, how'd you get in? Well, the story is I needed beer money, and then saying I had this book. And then now everybody can relate saying, oh man, I've been collecting comics since I was 12. And then, I needed beer money. And obviously that story can be massively refined, but all of a sudden that story invokes an emotion. You just laughed because you've been there where you were like, oh man, I need beer money next week and I'm in college.
Oh yeah, no. Wait, I think the best example of this is copyrighted, like email copy. That's what you're talking about there. Like I see a lot of that. I'm looking at a lot of the email copy, and on a personal note, ladies and gentlemen, make it a point, study microbreweries. Their copy is amazing. Almost all of them is incredible. Point of fact. But it's one of those, you reckon, like, again, learning, like, one of the cool things about today is we're still playing, like, how, like, we have some ideas of what the rules are, but we're still developing those rules. And I'm playing in all kinds of different, like, places, genres, feels, and I'm beginning to understand, like, I wish my newsletter was more, I updated my newsletter a little bit more than I did, because I have, with so much everything else I'm doing, it's always the last thing on my list. But now
I know the feeling. I know the feeling.
Yeah. But I realize I'm missing an opportunity there too, because again, it's storytelling. Can I make an interesting story? For example, you talk about offer, funnel, hook, right?
It's offer, story, hook, or hook, story.
Yeah. So what if I just do them all three at once? Is there a way I can make that like one thing? Can I break that down to one thing? Because that's an interesting idea. Then you can go like this. Can I spread it out? Can I do one of my like one of my favorite things is it's an old story. One of King Henry's wives would tell him a bedtime story every night to prevent execution, and she always would leave it on a cliffhanger. So he wouldn't kill her because he'd want to know what happened next. And she wouldn't tell him. I have to be here tomorrow and you'll find out. His curiosity would win out and it would stay in execution. So again, I'm thinking of all these things about human history and what I know about human psychology. And I'm thinking, I'm missing a boat here. And I should probably be doing something more than what I'm doing. Because again, like it's all storytelling and you can push the envelope and try so many different things in everything. And the moment, and I will say it's the creatives period, it doesn't matter what your genre is, advertising is at heart storytelling. Do not let the word sales get in the way of what you're actually doing.
So I mean, I think it's, I agree with parts of that. I mean, I think a lot of it is marketing. I think advertising is also, in there too. But I think it's also invoking emotion, because
Absolutely.
everything that there's only two ways I get into a product. If you came to me and said, Andrew, I just read book X, it's the greatest book I ever read, I actually think you're, and I know you and I've known you for 10 years. Obviously, I haven't known you for 10 years, but hypothetically, and, you're a friend of mine, I'm going to pick up that book, no question about it, because you verified it for me. So that invokes an emotion of trust in a lot of ways without that product having to be advertised for me. So if you recommend an anime to me, I say, hey, Josh, I just watched Full Metal Alchemist. What should I watch next? There's obviously, and you say, oh man, you should watch this weird show here. There's a sense of trust because you knew immediately what show I just watched. And we've been talking back and forth about it. Mm-hmm. And I made the joke that, I'm voting for Roy Mustang. He puts the spark back in government. Yes. But he should have been Fuhrer. That's all I'm going to say. I'm very upset about that. He would have had my vote, clearly. But and then the other thing is I also think it's emotion. So if you can write anything with story that has emotion and you hit upon a certain emotion, such as an emotion of fear or an emotion of sadness or an emotion of joy or an emotion of worry, that also sells a lot. And so, if I can relate to Alice in a circumstance of saying, who is she? I'm confused on what's going on. When people resonate to that, they're going to then be drawn further into a story. And I think that's something that people need to understand from an advertising standpoint. Now, I don't know if people should be writing to sell books, and that's a whole big debate, or if they should just write good stories and worry about how it's going to resonate later. That's a tricky situation because I'm sure that writers have done both sides of that coin for years.
I honestly just had this conversation with a future collaborator. We're one of the books I'm doing next year. Can't wait. Anvu's
Because I'll throw out what I'm doing. So I'm obviously planning a Kickstarter, and I obviously have my backers in mind, clearly, where there are rewards that are specifically designed for a group. I could tell you in which that there's a particular group in the comic world that loves metal cards.
Mm-hmm.
I am purposely building a product specifically for them. That doesn't mean that other people who in this group of X amount of people, that product and that pledge level or reward on my Kickstarter is specifically for a certain group because it will get me hit somewhere closer to my funding goal. Now, that doesn't mean that you might not like a metal card, for instance, but I'm not targeting you. Now, I understand that that's a little bit different than writing, but, it's very interesting because that's sort of advertising where I am purposely targeting and hitting a niche.
But that's what you need to do as a writer anyway. Like, this is the thing. Okay, so there's my answer is I'm somewhere in the middle. Here's the thing. I'm trying to stand out. Like, my books are unique. I think it's fair to say that not too many people would go down my route, which is totally fine. So here's the risk I'm taking. Because again, I am such a unique book. It's possible no one will try it because it's unfamiliar. And I'm speaking strictly as an advertiser. I think the book rocks, and that's just the way I like. Of course I do. I wrote it. But but here's the thing. So on the one hand, that's the risk I'm taking. Here's the other hand. I'm establishing a niche for myself. I'm building my brand. So what I want. This is me as a creative and as a creative. I want to, again, like I said, I want to surprise you. I want you to look at one of my books and go, I don't know. And after our first couple of pages, like, holy shit, where did I just get into? Right? And then go down the ride of surprise. That's what I want to do. That's the emotion I want to feel. I want to surprise you. I want to take you on this emotional roller coaster the whole way through. That's a very unique thing. People that want that are people that are looking for something different.
So just to even go into that, though, because what I think is sort of happening, and maybe I'm wrong, because I see sort of things of this where, people are saying, look, I'm going to go write a story about a wizard because wizards are popular. And I've seen people go down the road and say, look, I'm going to go write a 6-issue series about ponies. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. And then they'll go and do something that's more meaningful. And I get that writers have to eat. I get that writing is temp work. And what I mean by temp work is that it's not like you have tenure or you're going to your 9-to-5 job or you're working in bureaucracy and government. Writing to some degree is gig to gig, or there's no guarantees that you're going to get a book deal, for instance. So obviously I've seen people write things knowing that they're going to sell, but it's not that they're written badly, but there's no real passion in that. And they're also putting certain things in their books because they know it's going to appease and things like that. So I've seen that a lot. And then I've seen people say, fuck it, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. And who's coming with me?
So I'm going to push back slightly on that.
You can punt if you like.
No. I'm going to push back this slightly. Well, only slightly. I do think, there are formulas to write certain kinds of books out there, right? Probably the best example of this is the romance genre. There's a formula. The genre, in a lot of ways, carries you. Right? That all said, even the most formulaic of books can have a lot of passion in them. It can be a real genuine thing as well. Like I said, or like we mentioned earlier, you want to write that cotton candy book, right? and it's a formula that's been done before, go nuts. Because honestly, you can, if you're bringing something that's you to the story, it will work. I've seen right to formula. I've seen right to formula books, like you're talking about. Most of them are complete and utter dog shit. Most of them. But if there's something, but the best authors figure out ways of putting themselves even in those formulas. And when they do that, the book's special. Even if you know, like Saga is one of the most formulaic stories. If you really look at the nuts and bolts of it, it's a very formulaic story. But Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples tell it so well and do so much to the story. They made it theirs. And that's why it works so well. So that's where I'm going to push back slightly. But here, what I am going to...
I don't know if Saga is the best example.
I think it's very much it's a classic story, man. It's a very classic story for all the wrappings you have on it. I know where that story ends, man. I can tell you where it's going to end right now. I knew like because I know where it goes, but that doesn't matter. It's told so well. I'm going to go for the ride. I don't give a shit. It's going to be great, right?
I don't know, man. I don't think it's going to end the way it's supposed to.
Again, that comes to, again, we're going to talk about defying expectations versus following them. But you have to understand, like, it's like me with Alice. I'm following a formula. In spite of all the pressings and stuff, there's a formula I am following. Where I'm having fun is since I know what that formula is, I get to twist it up into my own little nook and cranny of the universe. That's what I've done, right? So there is something to be said for that. On the flip side, this is the thing. As a creative, and this strictly as a business, you have to bring something that an audience can recognize somewhat as familiar, but yet it's also something that stands on its own. And that is a huge challenge because you need a way to connect to people, something that people get, that evoking of emotion, that evoking of, as you say, like something that I could say, I'm familiar, it's verified, it's great. But the thing is, you got to look at yourself as a storyteller. Like, what kind of stories do you want to tell? In short, what do you give a shit about? Because I got news for you. No matter, we all obsess over things. There are potato magazines, Andrew. There are legitimately potato magazines. There are rock magazines. People obsess over everything. It's just understanding who you are as a creative and what you offer.
And this is where I think it also gets interesting is that also writing is only half the game at this point, I think.
It's about right, yeah.
Because it's also how you conduct yourself as a professional. Mm-hmm. It's also how, you act to people. It's how you act in public. It's how you act on social media. It's also the promotion you do. It's also how you dress your book, for lack of a better way. And what I mean by that is what cover you put on your book, or what cover you put on your comic, or even how you choose to sell your items at this point. Mm-hmm. And that's a very different concept to a lot of people. And also, and feel free to correct me and push back, but a lot of the people I speak to in the comic world and in the writing world, and I speak to far few authors, you probably speak to more authors than I do. And I don't know, big publishers and even indie, I think indie publishing, you have a little bit more control. But if you work for a big publisher, my mom had a book that was picked up by a big publisher, and you lose a lot. What?
Congrats to your mom.
Yeah, no, it's a really cool book. It's about postcards and alcohol and a lot of history surrounding it and cocktails across America. You should go buy the book, everybody. I'm just throwing my mom a free ad right there.
Yeah, you should. It's your mom, man. It's your mom.
It's a very good book because it's actually a very fun book, and you're learning about history, postcards, and how to make certain cocktails, and there's a lot of them in there. But you also lose a lot of control when you go to a publisher. And so what is that like for you? Because you have a lot of control in the way you do books, but it's also, you do a lot of media. You have a podcast, like I have a podcast, and you have a platform that you're building out. And I think that a lot of people, especially in comics, really don't want to do the marketing side. They don't want to get in the grass. And I get it, because if you just produced a book and you wrote it and you're drawing it, after a while you say, look, I want to just play video games. I'm tired. I wrote the thing. I want to just play video games. I want to go see my wife.
Yeah.
I want to go see my husband. I want to go play with my kid. That's a real thing. And it's tricky because it's that and so, maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, correct me.
No, you're not. I think there's a reality check that has to be kind of done though with authors and writers. We're no longer. I would say the writing is still the most important part of the job, but it's also, it's about half, maybe just a little bit more than half the job. The reality of the situation is, unfortunately for most writers out there, I'm part of the problem. I have a big ass mouth, and I can yell and scream to the high heavens. And it's not just me. There's lots of people that are doing the same thing. This is a business. I'm gonna make this very clear. If you're a writer that's doing this for a hobby, awesome. I'm not even like there's no shame in that. You are and if you're honest about that, if you're really truly honest about that, that's all you want to do. This does not apply to you at all. You have your own goals.
So can I ask you a question about that?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you view as a hobbyist? So for instance, let's say I'm going to throw out a hypothetical. If I write a book and then I self-publish it, and my goal is to just sort of go to cons and maybe make like $1,500 off of it, and I'm not really worrying about it paying my bills, and it's just a side project, and I'm just enjoying it, and if I make a little money, then that's that, and I don't have to go super crazy, for instance. Is that a hobbyist, or is that now entering a business, or is it the business side of saying, look, I'm trying to go full-time writer?
Okay, so hobbyist. I'm going to mention him by name. Mark Watson. His first and foremost priority in life is to be the best dad he can. He's got a day job that takes care of his family, and he writes on the side. His writing might not even be third on his list. It might be closer to fifth on his list. He's a damn good writer, but he's very honest. Like, this is not my goal. This is just something I do. I enjoy it. I care about it, but it's not my end all be all. My end all be all is my kids. That's a hobbyist, but also a very damn good one. Mark Watson's books are amazing. That all said, guy like me is trying to turn this into a business, into our platforms. He's making this his regular living. So he doesn't, because I'm not wired to really work for people too much anymore. So you have to figure out what audiences are you serving. Again, this is like going back to what you said about niches. You got to figure out your niches. Who are your niches? Who are your prospective readers, customers, clients? Those things are things you have to ask yourself, right? If you're serious about this. And traditional publishing cares about that more than maybe even indie does in a lot of ways. Yeah, they're doing some of the legwork, but much like any other entity, the more money traditional publishing puts into a project, the more they're going to promote it. The less money they put into it, the less they're going to promote it. The reality of the situation is, if you get a traditional deal and you're not at the high end of the food chain, right, you're going to be doing a lot of that marketing anyway. Whether you realize it or not, you're going to. It's part of the deal. So today, it's not just about your books. It's about you as a person and as a brand. And I don't care what path you choose, right? That's what it's about. Now,
there's also hybrid paths that are emerging now.
Oh, I'm one of them. I'm a hybrid. I get traditionally published still. I get paid to do jobs. Same time, I'm doing my own thing because it serves me to do my own thing.
Oh, no. I meant more in the comic realm where people are doing things on Kickstarter and then they get picked up by Scout or Second Sight Publishing.
Oh, no. But yeah, but it's not that different than what happens to me. It's the same thing in some ways. Because I've established an audience. There's proof of an audience. I have a proof of concept. Sometimes a publisher will come and say, hey, we'll do your work. And if it's the right deal, if it's the right kind of person, sure, absolutely. But at the same token, like that's going to become a much more interesting angle in the years to come too, because depending on the person, they might be a bigger name. They might be a bigger name than what the publisher can offer them. I've built my platform up. I can't just be published with anybody anymore either. It doesn't serve me on a business level anymore just to go with anybody. That doesn't mean I won't. Like I know I have nothing but respect and love for any.
It's that's interesting that you mention it, because there are certain people that I won't collab with.
Yeah.
You need to have a certain caliber. That I was just in a collab meeting yesterday, and the person was like, "Hey, why'd you pick me?" And I'm like, "Well, you sort of meet a niche where I've been doing this thing, and I'm coming out of the gate. But also, there's certain people that I'm not at that level to collab with that yet either. But come around next year, I'm going to be further along."
Mm-hmm.
And so it gets very interesting. But also, I don't forget where I'm from. But it's also different on a different from a collab on a metal card versus on a publishing deal. But it's also similar where it's this idea where I definitely think that problem is coming, where publishers are either going to have to, people are going to outgrow publishers, or publishers are going to have to offer bigger money or more contracts or a better deal that benefits people.
Okay, this is kind of how I'm going to tell you how I see this going. A guy like me is building up his platform now. Am I opposed to working for a traditional publisher in the future? No, I'm not. But I've also made the decision personally for myself, because I've gotten award nominations on my own. I've done things on my own and have been rewarded for it. So my business question to any publisher I work with is this: what do you offer that I cannot get on my own? And it's a business question. It's not an insult. It's a business question. Is there an audience that you're going to get that's going to serve my goals? Because if the answer is no, then I probably shouldn't work with that publisher, no matter who it is.
I'm sure you're asking more questions than just that, but I think the gist is that, because if a company and a publisher offered you like legitimately $100,000 as an advance, all of a sudden it becomes very interesting when all that stuff happens. It's the same thing that, I'm a big believer that I think podcasts are going to be either picked up for licensing. I think that if SiriusXM wants to stay relevant, they're going to have to go and pull out of podcasting. And I think that's coming, and I think it's coming a lot sooner than people realize. Mark Cuban's getting into the game with Fireside Chat and that entire platform. So things are going to be happening. And the question I have on the podcasting front end, similar to publishing, is that somebody might come and say, we want your content. We don't want to own it. We want to license it. And the question becomes that, what are you offering?
Again, what's in it for me? Because is the money you're offering me worth what I'm trading for it? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. Intellectual property is it's the major financial boom of our world. I think one of the biggest lies a lot of writers tell themselves is there's no money in writing. Nothing can be further from the truth. There's lots of money in this game. The reality is you just got to recognize what the game you're actually playing. And a lot of writers don't want to look at that, honestly. The truth is,
I'm well aware of what was valuable. That elf that's up there right there is very valuable. Mm-hmm. My elf right there. I'm really glad.
Absolutely.
That elf cost me nothing, but it's been with me for almost 10 years. And that elf is my symbol. And that elf is beyond valuable. You can't make me an offer for that elf that wouldn't be insult. Somebody said, "We'll buy your logo for $100,000. I'll consider it." But that's what I mean, in which people don't understand that little cute thing is beyond valuable, and I'm very protective of it. I'm beyond protecting somebody. Why are you fighting over a little elf? Because it is my symbol. It's my company's symbol. And I'm willing to die for it, because I'm willing to legally go into debt for it if necessary.
Well, logo, not so much. The intellectual property behind it, yes. Right? That's like the thing. The thing is, this is how we gotta look at it. We are making intellectual property that can be sold and resold a myriad of different ways. Joe Rogan hit the jackpot with Spotify, right? He doesn't care. Not to the same degree he did, because again, they gave him enough of an offer to justify his worth. And he's got an audience that Spotify is trying to cultivate. That's what Spotify wants. Joe Rogan now has security and exclusivity. He doesn't have to worry about the building of the platforms or moving.
But I think he also knows that after that deal is done, his net worth and his brand name is going to be so much better because he is the GOAT of podcasting, and he's the guy. His brand. If Spotify was a venture round, and there was pre-money Rogan, Spotify, and then after Spotify money, everybody's worth a lot more because of that deal, and everybody's going to be worth a lot more after that deal is over.
It might. Well, I'm curious about what he got in some ways, but again, that's something I may ask him someday. But it's
Not
just,
if I get there first. It's a chat.
No. You get there. I'll get there on my own time. He'd be an interesting conversation. But he's a very smart guy. I bring this up because that's the thing. Like, we're going to be asking those questions going forward, because the one thing that's true, absolutely true about traditional publishing, no matter who you're talking to, what you're trading to get into it is the fact that they are going to sell and resell your product while you are there for the years to come. So if they're going to make dividends off of that, what's in it for you? And at this point in time, because of the cost is so cheap to make things, right? Well, I don't need the platform the same way I did. That isn't to say the platform isn't useful. It is. But is it so useful I want to give up my rights for this so many X amount of years? I don't know about that anymore. Like I said, the novelty of working for again, strictly on a business level, there's value in working for these places. But the novelty of it doesn't have the same ring to me it once did.
It's also, I would imagine that, it's kind of like when you first start writing, you're like, hey, if you're in year one of writing and you get picked up by a publisher, and, Penguin House is a good example, I think. All of a sudden you're a brand new writer, you're 25, this will make your career. But now that you're 35 and you've been doing it for 10 years, maybe you're like, look, while that will give me a boost, that boost now is only 20% effective versus when I needed it being 100% effective. So it's kind of like that, where at that point, I think it's a safe assumption where you already have a name established. It's kind of like for me, and I think even for you, it's like I've been doing podcasting for so long that, somebody can't come in and say I'm a podcast marketer and expect to, say I'm going to push you organically. It doesn't have the same ring when it did 7 years ago. Or if I get invited to a con to speak and they're like, well, we're not going to pay you, that doesn't have the same ring as it once did, because I can get the exact same media legitly by posting in 10 Facebook groups that I can get from the con. At this point, is it nice to go someplace for free? Sure. But at the same time, I want to stay home half the time, and I would rather work on my next project, my next episode, than spend 3 days at a con and then travel for a day and a half and stay in a hotel on a hard bed.
It comes down what am I getting out of this at the end of the day, right? Am I getting what I want? And if the answer is yes, okay, sure, we'll talk. If the answer is no, I'm good. Like, and that's it. Like, I've come to that point in my life where I love doing things. And again, I say this with all respect in the world. Penguin, I know the editor of Dog Books, the editor in chief. She's amazing. Steela Gilbert is an amazing person, and I would love to do a book for them someday. That would be great. But at the same time, it has to be the right kind of offer for me, because I can get The more audience you have as a creative, the more leverage you have. That's just how it goes. So the more audience you have, the more leverage. The more leverage, like my podcast, for example. My audience, like the business of a podcast is really simple. The amount of people that listen to it is what advertisers are interested in.
Yep.
That's they don't care about your content that much. Care about it a little bit, but not to the degree people think.
They care about the ROR, the ROI,
yes.
And also, some, if you have such a niche podcast, if you have the Beekeepers podcast and you only get 500 listeners, but you have every single bee expert and they come to you, there might be a company that specializes in bees and they might advertise on your show because they know all of their clients are listening. And if they want a product out, it's also that as well, where it shows, and this is a common myth in podcasting, is that you don't need a large audience. You don't. What you need is you need the right audience. And my sponsor has sort of proven that with Mixum, because obviously they're a printing company and I mostly interview people who are running Kickstarters. And so my audience and my advertising is a B2B play. That's all it is when it's boiled down. And the idea that I'm in groups where people need places to print their books and people want a discount, no matter what that discount is. And a bunch of people listen and then they're like, man, I'm not happy with my printer, or my printer is busting my balls. Let me try Mixum. And then that's what makes them happy. And so far, I've brought them real money into it, and I'm probably slightly underpaid for what I brought them. But
probably, that's okay.
But also, I didn't know if I could do it, but now that I do know that I can do it, obviously I have a little more leverage, and my show's growing a little bit every time I do an episode. And there you go. And so obviously, that's what advertisers care about, is that they want your content to have a return for them. And if it does that, they're going to be happy. Because if they're making money, then they're going to continue to pay somebody like me, or you for that matter, to make money for them. And if you're making money, I'm making money, and my advertiser is making money, who cares?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But that's the business of podcasting in a nutshell. So I have right now on average 1,600 to 2,000 downloads a month. Average. Right. Last month was a little lower because I think of the Thanksgiving holiday, but right now it's it's exactly right back to where it was. So 1,600 people from across, primarily the United States, some Europe, some Canada, download my podcast.
I'm doing similar on my other show too. It's amazing when you're just doing it and it's great.
Yeah. So, but again, so I know what my audience is. I know how to do this. I know who would be interested, who probably should advertise for it. I'm trying to expand into a couple other areas so I can get, again, a little bit more growth. Again, nothing that's against the brand. What I've done, just like I want more video game stuff on the board. I want a little bit more heavy metal on the board, because that's stuff I like. And it's also, it's not against what I'm doing. Right. So, but that's the thing, right? You recognize who you are and who you're not, and you go for it. And this is a question, no matter who you are as a creative, you have to ask this on a business level. Who is likely going to read this? Who's going to read my Alice in Wonderland? Alice in Wonderland enthusiasts will read this, right? Poetry people will read this. If to see nothing else, graphic novelists might read this because it's different.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people have to ask. I'm a big believer in knowing who your audience is. And it's a great question. It's something that I did when I started doing, my entire show. And I started my show obviously 9 years ago, and then it morphed into this, but I still have the other show. So I have two podcasts, and they're separate for good reasons. They deal with similar topics, but one of them deals with, it's just pre-recorded, and the other is obviously live, as we are right now. But I have a pretty good idea who my audience is and my perfect listener is. And I think it's very important that people actually ask those questions to themselves, because understanding who your audience is. And, for instance, if I was to start, a comic book investing podcast, which I tried and I just don't have the time. That audience is different than this audience. That audience would be different, but my style, it's I'm going to convert people over from obviously this show into that show a little bit, but also that targets a whole different niche and it operates differently because I'm hitting a very, very specific component. And I'm also doing something slightly different on what I was trying to do, which was teaching. And obviously, there's a whole battle plan for that, and it's a whole separate thing. But it's going to be. I understand what that audience is. I understand what that income level looks like for the people who want to do that. I understand the mentality and the thought process. Versus here, I think obviously people want to be entertained. People want to talk about their books. People want graphic novels, and they want to see what's out there. And there's a variety of other things that people want when they're watching something like this versus when we're talking about investing and comic book investing in particular. But I think it's very important. And when you write that Fahrenheit 451 book is going to target a different niche than the Alice in Wonderland stuff you're doing.
Yes. But also hopefully some of that will cross over because, like, again, a unique presentation. It's something that only I can do. That's the idea behind it, right? So that's what's going to be the common thread. Do I expect the same audience? No, not entirely. But people will know that it's something I would do. And
I also think it's something that people say, "Oh man, I really like Josh's, thing that he did with Alice, and I like his style. I'm going to go try what he just did next." Because once you get somebody into your tribe, for instance, oh, I really enjoyed that. Let me try something like this, right? I mean, you've read graphic novels by somebody and like, oh man, he did a really good job. When's his next book? Oh, I'm not, I'll give a great example. George Perez. I love George Perez on Teen Titans. Now, I am, and people can get angry at me, I don't love Wonder Woman. I just never got into Wonder Woman. But George Perez did a Wonder Woman original story that came in like the Blu-ray thing, and I saw it was George Perez, and I'm like, you know what? I like George Perez's work. Let me try it, and I thoroughly enjoyed his interpretation and him doing a Wonder Woman origin story and doing like those 4 issues. So my point is that it obviously, because if he wasn't the writer on that or the artist, I wouldn't have touched it.
Well, first up, my best to George. Second, no, George is great. I love George. I actually met George Perez once. It was kind of cool. I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and he was drawing for the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, and I'll never forget this for as long as I live. He goes to me as he's drawing. He's got this like conflicted look on his face. He looks to me. Should I give Zatanna a top hat? I was speechless. First and foremost, I am never going to tell George Perez what to draw. Ever. That's what he does. This was how I met him. He finally and I didn't have to wait very long. He put the top hat on Zatanna. He just could not help himself. I became a fan of George Perez right there because I saw him and I interviewed him actually. That interview never aired, unfortunately, because I was a dumbass. But this was a long time ago when very early in my career, and I became a fan of George Perez because of the energy he brings to everything he does. There's an authenticity, a sweetness, and he's got this great energy to him. Like he was humbled. The cool thing is he's like, I'm still the pretty girl at the prom. Everybody still likes my stuff. No one hated. In fact, I'll tell you like how much I like George. His last big project for Boom was Sirens. Gotham, like the book Sirens. I didn't care if it came out once a year. It's George freaking Perez. I don't care. He had earned the right by that point in his career to take whatever time he needed to do a book. And that's how I looked at it. And I apparently wasn't the only one. That book was pretty sweet. And he still did great stuff all the way through. And that's the thing, right? He created that impression on me. So I made it a point to look at his stuff down the road. And I didn't get everything he did following that. But what I got, I really enjoyed.
So my point is that when somebody says, "Oh, this is really interesting," they then come in and they're like, well, I'm just going to go and buy everything that guy touches.
Mm-hmm.
In which that, there are people like Brian K. Vaughan is a good example of that, where anything Brian K. Vaughan touches, I want to own and I want to read. It has nothing to do with saga. It has to do with Y the Last Man.
Mm-hmm.
Because I thought Y the Last Man is an amazing graphic novel. And I feel that has earned Brian K. Vaughan the right to basically do whatever he wants in comics. I don't know, though, if my opinion is going to stay the same after the Gundam movie, but that's a different discussion.
Yes. Well,
he might get an audible on that one.
Well, try something new. You can't argue somebody for trying something new, right?
It's a tough task.
Yeah, but that's just it. He's trying something new. And you can't knock a guy for doing that. I'm
just saying, I think that movie is going to be really good or really bad. There's going to be no middle ground. And I don't think, and I'm a Gundam fan saying this.
So I'm of two minds. This is how I look at it. I'm a little more forgiving of movies than I think most people are, because I've done some movie work. So I kind of recognize the work that goes into putting something together like that. I know that the stuff I'm reading isn't always going to make the screen. What I care about is if the intent of the material is being honored. So if he does that, I probably will give him a pass, right? Because let's be honest, dude, you know this. There are just some things that aren't going to be there. No matter what they do, they're just not going to be there.
I think that they're going to give it a good old try.
Oh, sure.
And I just think that it's tough, and I don't think that there's not effort there. I don't think it's even going to be the screenwriting problem. I think that filming a Gundam movie is hard. It Absolutely. Is hard. And we've already had one that was a bad live action done in Japan, and it wasn't Hollywood. But it's going to be a tricky circumstance. And I have a feeling from a writing standpoint, it's not an easy claim. It's not an easy claim from, an effects position and other things like that. It's just going to be rough, I feel. But, hopefully I'm very negative. And if I'm a -1 on it, if they make it a 10, well, they got 11 points up on me. So there we go.
That's awesome. No, I look at it more like I just recognize the fact that we live in we live in a world where a movie a good movie has at most 120 minutes in it. I think you can get a really good 180, but realistically 120 minutes is 120 to 150 minutes is the max you're going to get in a movie.
We get a 180 movie once every 20 years. That's good.
Yeah, that's my point. But that's my point. So in 2 hours, you gotta be very particular about what you talk about, and you gotta look at the limitations of what your budget is. Now, Gundam they put a lot into, but at the same time, I'm very well aware of the fact that it's not going to be quite what I saw in the anime. It's not quite what I saw in the manga. It's going to be something different. And I've accepted that already going in. I want the spirit of it to be there. If the spirit's there, like this is probably going to be the most controversial thing I say on this. I did not hate the last Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reboot. I didn't hate it.
That's because you're a wrestling fan, so it's all right.
Well, it's not just that. It was just the fact that the one thing he did right, the one thing he absolutely did right, is he kept the brothers, like they were brothers, and you could feel that in the story. Now, there's a lot of other things about that movie I'm not crazy about, but I didn't mind it because he kept the most important element to it there.
So I'll tell you how I felt about that movie.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed that movie. Now, let me explain why I enjoyed that movie. I went into that movie not caring one way or the other, and I'm like, we have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on a movie. We have to go in understanding we have turtles. They're life-size humanoid turtles. They're ninjas, and this is awesome. Just, and I'm there with my friends. We're like the oldest people. We're surrounded by like 6-year-olds who are just all giddy, and I'm like, I can't boo this movie. Like, in this environment, it is impossible for me to boo this movie. And I was just like, that's that. There's nothing for me to do in this circumstance, because what am I going to do? Boo a movie that is just fun, and I went in with no expectations, and I had fun with it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's the thing. Like, say what you will about the Michael Bay Ninja Turtle. It's like, whatever. You know what? It was fun. I didn't expect it to be anything more than what I got on the screen. That was what I expected. He kept the brotherhood, like he kept them as brothers intact. They had a good family dynamic. That's the shit the Turtles are built on. They're not built on I love the fact that you can put them in Dimension X one week, and then you can put them on like the ground in the streets. I mean, Ninja Turtles is one of the most ingenious, versatile concepts ever. I still love the comic to this day.
Oh, I mean, it's great. It was built out of being a joke. That was great about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it was goofy fun. It's always been goofy fun, and that's why I love the concept. There is an avid, like, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic from IDW is one of the most consistent books on the market. Always.
It's that and Larry Hama's G.I. Joe.
Yeah. So it's like they totally they have an audience. I am one of them, and I have no shame to admit it. It's a fun book each and every month. It's a solid book each and every month. It's true to the concepts I grew up on. It feels my inner nostalgia. Also, Kevin Eastman's part of the book. I'm in. I was just like, when
he came back, it was great.
Yep.
So it's great. It's I don't know what's going on with the Turtles and IDW. I don't think anything is going on with them for a little bit. I know IDW is having things with Transformers and G.I. Joe, and
the big thing with Ninja Turtles right now is Last Ronin, the Last Ronin miniseries they're doing right now.
So what I meant is more on the business side.
No, they're where they're at, and that's cool.
Because Transformers and G.I. Joe are up in the air right now. Mm-hmm. But that's neither here nor there, and whoever picks those things up is going to be interesting. And I'm not too sure, but Hasbro owns everything, so what do I know? It's Fight-A-Con and Hasbro.
Yeah, say whatever. Power to the Has. As is, I've just enjoyed my Ninja Turtles run. So
I enjoyed Last Ronin a lot, and then where I'm up with that, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. That's the story everybody's wanted, and my only issue is that I wish it was canon, because I think it'd be so much fun. But I get why it can't be.
I'm just enjoying the story for what it is. I don't worry about. This is the.
You're not a true Turtles fan, Josh.
No, it just.
We've uncovered it. It's clear now.
Oh, So last year on my show, William
Just
Holland.
Just go back to Alice, will you?
Yeah. Well, just a minute. Just gonna finish this point, then we're gonna go back and we'll wrap up. But I remember, so William Holland came on my show for the drink and draw. We literally spent an hour talking about Last Ronin.
Who came on?
William K. Holland. He's a buddy of mine.
Okay.
He's doing the drink and draw. He's a big Turtles fan too. So he had read Last Ronin and I hadn't. And he told me, so who do you think the Last Ronin is? I said, it's got to be Michelangelo. It's got to be Michelangelo. He goes, why? Because he's the most interesting one of these guys to tell this story with. Leo and Raph are boring. So that only really leaves two, Don or Mike. And Don's kind of been done in the regular book. You could still do it with Don, but I think Michelangelo is the most interesting of the two choices. When it came out and I got it and I revealed who it was, it's like, yes, I knew it. I knew it'd be Mike. I knew it. It's great. So I love it. It's been my favorite book this year. So
fair enough. I feel you on that. I can tell you it's been my favorite book, but that's not the point. My favorite book came out last week. So
A Cowboy Bebop?
Yes, it did. And I did something. I had the coolest Wednesday of the year, because I had Claudia Yanisello on, and she does the cover C's for that book. And may or may not be getting a few more people who worked on the Cowboy Bebop series in the next few weeks on my show. So, and there's something cool about those cover Cs that I don't think people understand is that they all connect.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a connecting cover. 4 issues 1, 2, 3, and 4, and there may or may not be an issue 5. Just saying. They said there was only 4, but there might be a 5th one, which is a little awkward because the show is canceled.
Yeah, but you know what? Sometimes that works out anyway. Like it's weird. Sometimes those properties that don't work on television find their home in comics, right? So it's not. I mean, who knows? Like all one can do is just put the books out and see what happens.
Look at what happened with Jericho, the show Jericho, where Jericho had one season of like 23 episodes, I think. Then people were so pissed off that they actually, because at the end of one of them, they said nuts, because from like quoting World War II, I think with like tanks, is that I forgot the entire thing with that. But then they sent all these packages of nuts to the studio, all the Jericho fans, and they did a 6-parter, and then they continued it for like 2 or 3 more books into the comics, and IDW did it. And it was kind of cool because producing an Avatar: Last Airbenders on that as well, you know, where comics is definitely cheaper than television.
Yep, definitely.
Significant.
So that's the thing. Like you never know where things will go. So I mean, and also like I said, I'm trying to get my hands on that book too because I like me some. Who doesn't like me some Cowboy Bebop? So.
Hey, you know what it is? I could find you a shop, and all I'm gonna say is that if you're a variant hunter, those books are expensive.
Not a variant guy. I'm not a variant guy. I just like good story.
So I'm gonna ask you a question because there are 8 regular covers that are all just regular comic price, which is like $4. So there's like the blank, there's the photo cover, there's the cover A, the cover C's, the cover D's, and then there's like a Yoshi Yantana cover, and I like Yoshi, and they are amazing at what they do. And then there's also just really cool other covers that are out there, and then there's like the hollow foil stuff, so it's super cool, and I may or may not have bought a bunch of them. And one of them though was super expensive, where it's like a $300 book, which is crazy.
I believe it. I mean, it is the nature of the variant beast, right? But it's like I just like a good story. I'm an old fashioned guy when it comes to comics. I love reading them, but then I just put them up. Like I have all my stuff currently in this one little shelf right here. Really happy with it, right?
But the question becomes, with the 8 covers, which one do you pick? Because they're all the same price. There might even be 9 covers at a regular price. And my favorite thing about the blank covers with the Cowboy Bebop is that they're in the colors of Taint. So nice. The first one is green, the second one's blue, the third one is yellow, and the fourth one is red. The blank covers. So that's super dope what they did with that.
I'm looking at the covers right now, see if I can find them. Let's see.
Super cool. It's amazing what they've done with them. And
that. Oh wow, I do see that. Yeah, they're very cool. The one I really so the one that looks really fun. Tokyo Pop's doing this?
No, it's Titan. Titan Comics is in on the game.
Okay. Let's have a look here.
So the Tokyo Pop thing was, I think, 2003, I want to say. Or maybe it was 98 it came out, the manga.
Okay, so the one I really like, okay, that's let's see, let's find out here. I'm looking at them. I found them. Okay.
I'm curious now.
I'm looking at this one. Nah. That one's fun. We'll keep going. I'd probably go close. So I like the poker one. The poker.
What is that, cover D?
Yeah. Yeah, I like
I'm
that.
good. I am so good at this. It's not even funny how good I am.
Let's take a look. Actually, that's my favorite of these ones. The other one I don't mind. Is the second one. So
the photo?
not the photo, the one where he's got the cigarette and the gun, the cigarette lighter thing. That's
It says C on the thing.
yeah. The C, cover C or cover D.
So my interview last Wednesday, she did cover C.
Okay,
And
cool.
what's cool about the cover C, and then I could say it now, unless you don't, I'm not going to say it actually. There's something very cool that if you put all of them together, you will see. And
Okay.
it's something that is, if you go to the second one on that, which is issue 2 that just came out that she did, if you notice the bullet holes, and there's something in there that unless you know what you're looking for, you're not going to get it. But I'll tell you off air, so I don't want to ruin anything for anybody because
Okay, very cool.
I know what it is, but I'm not going to go ruin it for people. But that I digress right there.
Yeah. So no, it sounds like it's no it like it. I love this show. It's a fun show. In terms of the anime, I haven't seen this actual television series yet, but it looked like I love the anime. It was so fun. So,
Look,
I
all
was
I'm going to say is never say never with Netflix.
yep.
Never ever say something else. And we've seen on YouTube, Cobra Kai went from YouTube to Netflix, and you know what it is? Who knows where Cowboy Bebop's going to end or go to, or maybe Netflix will say, there's a lot of people who like this stuff, and maybe they're going to have a change of heart. And you know what it is? Maybe if enough people say, look, we want more of this, and you never say never, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Just look at Drew McIntyre in WWE.
Oh,
But
he's he's got a really cool story. Whatever I might think about the character and how he was used, in the last year. No, man, he worked his tail off. He earned it. He earned it.
so
And
I'm going to throw you a theory on wrestling.
mm,
Where do you think Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre are going to be at WrestleMania?
I see Bobby Lashley getting a special attraction match of some kind. I don't see him in the world title picture. They would be best if he was not there. Who do I put him against, though, is a much more interesting question.
This is what I think WWE should do, and this is what I want. I think WWE should figure out how to create a SmackDown versus Raw match at WrestleMania. Bobby Lashley, Drew McIntyre.
I think Drew's got Roman at WrestleMania.
I don't know. I think day one, Lesnar's going to destroy Roman. I think Lesnar's going to end Roman.
I don't think so. I think Roman Reigns is a very interesting problem they have in WWE. And what I mean by that is I don't know if they have the guy on the roster to truly beat him. The problem is Drew would have been a good choice. Big E would have been a good choice. But Big E's the WWE champion, and I see Big E against Seth Rollins at WrestleMania. That's what I see as the Raw main event for WrestleMania. I could see Edge versus Bobby Lashley. I think that's a very real possibility. I think that'd be a really fun match for both of those guys. But if I were, or the other one is I would put Brock and Bobby together. That's the other match I would do. I would actually do. Roman's a tough one because they're not going to bury Brock, but I don't think he's the guy to beat him. Big E's got the WWE title, so you don't have him beat him. The best choice to beat Roman Reigns right now, believe it or not, in my opinion, is Jey Uso. And I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Oh man, see, it gets interesting in which that they have a real issue because it's very much that it kind of goes to the idea of who, when you have somebody on such a run, who do you have beat them so that victory actually means something.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets very, very interesting. And I personally think, though, that given what happened at Survivor Series between Drew and Bobby, it makes a lot of sense because those two guys work so well together that's just.
I'm all for that in theory, but I think I'm just looking at the both rosters honestly right now, and I'm like, who else do you put against Roman in WrestleMania? I mean, I'm okay. I've actually enjoyed Viking Brock Lesnar. He's been fun on television when he's been on television.
Yeah,
But I
no,
do,
I think the only other option is that I mean, you're not going to bring in Goldberg for Roman because that makes no sense.
no.
The only other thing that might make sense is The Rock.
Except I don't think you get The Rock this year. I don't think you get The Rock this year. So what do you do? So looking at the rosters, okay, in my opinion, prior to him winning the WWF Championship, Big E was the best choice to take down Roman. He was the best one they had. He doesn't need it now. Doesn't need it at all. He's the WWE champion. He's actually their best champion right now, in my opinion. And honestly, he should have a long run also. But you can do stuff with Big E. And I think him versus Seth Rollins one-on-one at WrestleMania, if you can hold it off that long, fantastic stuff. I think Seth deserves or has earned that spot. So there's that end. But even without Seth, okay, you could put Big E against Lashley again. Although I'm not crazy about that, but you could, right? You could put Big E against you can put Big E against a few people, and they would
Put him
be a
against
lot.
AJ Styles. That'd be a good match.
Yeah, that'd be a fun one. That'd be a fun one. You can
And
put him
then,
against.
and then the way you end Big E is you have Big E versus Kofi or Big E versus Xavier, and you move one of them over essentially to Raw.
But the thing is, I don't. At this point, I want to let that dude have a long reign. He's
I'm
actually.
not, I'm not saying you do that now. I'm saying that you do that 8 months in.
Oh,
And
I think Big E should be champ till minimum Survivor Series next year. Minimum, my opinion. I let him grow and be the world champion for a while. That dude's a main eventer. He's been one for a while. It's been cool to watch him. Let him grow and develop. Just make his opponents as interesting as possible. That's the only challenge with him. Roman has a bigger problem. He doesn't have anybody to work with other than Drew right this minute. I don't know. They have not done a very good job of giving. Let's do the comparison. Let's do the comparison, okay? You compare him to Kenny Omega's reign. All right? The only match I really wasn't crazy about was him versus Christian. But that was still a good match. I wasn't against the match. It's the only one where I was like, oh, you had Pac. You had Orange Cassidy. You still could have done it. You did a match with Jungle Boy. You had like Moxley, Kingston. You had, and they didn't hit everybody. Darby didn't get a shot at him. They kept those two away from each other. Miro. Oh my God, Miro versus Kenny would have been awesome, right? But you had guys that even though Omega is no longer champion, you still have guys Omega can work with when he comes back. Not to mention Adam Cole, who just got into the company too. That's money.
Not to mention Daniel Bryan.
I'm not. They kind of had a match, but yeah, you said the match for the title. CM Punk, same thing. Like they had so many guys to put against Omega even before he lost the title. Page was the right guy to dethrone him, and it was the right time to dethrone him.
And also when Kenny comes back, whether Page is champ or not, they're going to work a program.
Actually, I don't think you have to right away. I think it's the opposite. You put Kenny and Cole against Cole. The next feud for Kenny is Adam Cole. That's the next feud for him, and there's big money in that. So cool. Compare that to Roman Reigns. Roman's best program, his whole new run has been Jey Uso, but he's had good ones with Edge. He did a pretty decent one with Daniel Bryan. Right, his Cesaro match was fun if short. So there's only two guys on that roster that he hasn't worked with that I really want to see. Nakamura, although Nakamura is not a big enough deal in WWE to make me believe he's even got a chance. So I don't want that at WrestleMania. The other possibility is Drew. But you're going to keep Drew as far away from him as you can until WrestleMania, because if Roman gets him early, who does Roman fight? That's the problem. Like, they have a huge problem with Roman right now.
It also gets very, very interesting with WWE, because the other thing that's going on is that they're now not doing like merchandising sale. I don't know when that kicks in, and that's going to be a bigger issue too for WWE.
Yeah.
Because now somebody like Roman, somebody like Cena, somebody like, AJ Styles, guys who sell a lot of merch, it's going to be very interesting what they do when their contracts are up.
AJ, I think, is a WWE lifer.
I think now he is, but
Yeah.
Roman is too. Seth is.
Yeah, it makes even Randy Orton, some of those guys, it makes no sense for them to leave. I think next year some of the AEW guys will go to WWE. Some of them, because I look at someone like a Brian Cage, who really does not have a spot on the AEW roster right now. Right, I just don't see it. Right, Lance Archer, Wardlow, Powerhouse Hobbs all do what he does in some form or fashion. And he doesn't have the talking presence those guys do. And so I don't know if he fits there or not. And I'm not saying a lot, because Brian Cage is an athletic, talented, big guy. He can do a lot of amazing things in the ring. But there's a lot of guys in AEW that can do a lot of amazing things in the ring. He doesn't stand out as much there. In WWE, he'd stand out quite a bit more. I could see him going. I could also see a few other people on that roster going too, because you can't serve everybody. People are going to go.
It's going to be interesting though, because come January, look at what's going on. You got Matt Taven from the Kingdom back and beyond. You have a bunch of guys from Ring of Honor back and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a lot of guys on the indies, and while WWE says they're not going to pull from the indies, well, you know what it is? A lot of people are going to be free agents, and the indies are going to slay. And of course, WWE is going to pull from the indies, because one way or another. And while WWE might not farm them out the way they were doing by buying all the talent into NXT, which is what they did, they're still going to hire from the indies. No question about that.
Well, okay, so the one guy they could have beat Roman, although not right now, but maybe in a year, is Braun Breaker. Braun could do it. Braun's believable. He looks exactly like his dad. It's scary. And, he's someone that I truly believe could kick Roman's ass.
But I don't think they're going to pull him out from NXT 2.0.
I do. But he's the one guy you could put a rocket ship on and people would buy it. He needs a little bit more time in the ring, but you give him that time, you could do it. With him, you could do it.
I think what they want to do is that they want him to beat Tommaso in NXT.
I don't think so. I don't think you don't want with the way they got NXT built, you don't want a young guy to be the champion for long. You want Tommaso's going to be there until he retires. So he's the guy that's going to be at or right around the top of the championship at all times. He's there to help whoever the young guy is they want to be a champion in a bigger company, teach them how to work like a main eventer. And when that guy goes, Tommaso will work with the next guy. I don't think Braun stays for an extended period of time. I think he could be called up as early as after WrestleMania. I wouldn't be shocked.
I don't know, because I have no faith in NXT.
I'm looking at him. He's got a lot of talent. Assuming they don't rush, they could. The old Brock Lesnar 6-month push to the title, right? That he did with Beat the Rock. They could do that with Braun. He's got the tools to do it. So I'm not saying they will, but look at the rest of that roster. Who else looks the part that the crowd would quickly get behind to beat Roman? I don't know if that person exists other than him.
Yeah, I don't know who's going to beat Roman, and honestly, I don't know if WWE wants to get rid of Roman because Roman looks like a champ, acts like a champ, and he is just easy to build cocky stories with, and it's good for the short time and long term for that matter because they got something good going with this head of the table shit.
Oh, I love. He's a combination of a gangster, and he kind of works like an old school Ric Flair, actually, in a lot of ways, which is kind of fun. He talks a lot of shit, and then he gets his butt handed to him. It's fun to watch. But
I don't think they should use anybody, but they got to build Jey Uso out because that makes a lot of sense because then you have a bigger program and you got the lineage in there, and that story makes a hell of a lot more sense.
Oh, I just think like on the main roster, he's your best bet. But I don't. Again, they haven't done anything in that direction to indicate they're going to go that way. So I don't know what to tell you. But I'm again. That's the problem they have with Reigns. He's worked everybody he can work with. Really, the reason he's working with Brock again is Brock has a big enough box office name, and no matter how many times Brock loses. No, but there's not a person alive that doesn't think Brock can't kick anybody's ass. There's not a person alive that doesn't think that. He looks the part, has the backing and training to do it, so he doesn't lose much losing. But you can't keep putting Roman and Brock together forever either. So you've got to do something different. So
you know what the answer is? The answer is easy. The answer is that they need to get past WrestleMania. They need somebody from SmackDown to win Money in the Bank. Then they need Brock to beat the shit out of Roman. And then somebody who's a no-name fucking steals a win out of Roman or Brock with Money in the Bank. That's the only answer they got.
It's not a good answer, though, because it doesn't build anybody. The problem with that is you have a guy this hot. The guy that should beat him should be made. A Money in the Bank cash-in will not make a guy, right, that way. Unless they do what Big E did, right? Which is Big E went, hey, tonight I'm cashing in, and I'm coming for you. Big E did that, and he won. That's the only way. But you see the problem, like from a story.
I didn't say that this is just WWE classic story because the problem with WWE is that we're trying to write a good story.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit about a good story. I want everybody to get outraged on Twitter, which is what WWE wants, because they want the negative press and they don't really give a shit about if it's a good story or if it makes sense. That's their whole business model.
But there's a point. This is okay. Let's go back to comics real sec. There's a point with a comic book that you have to fulfill the expectations of an audience. I look at Spider-Man. Spider-Man's the best example of this. Okay? Everybody knows the Clone Saga, what that did to because you screwed with the expectations of your audience. You burned them. One More Day did the same thing, although not to the same level. So you have to at some point deliver on the expectations you're building up. With in wrestling, Roman Reigns, somebody needs to kick his ass. Really kick his ass, not name Brock Lesnar. And the only, again, the best people for it are either the current WWE champion. Who else is there? Who else is there?
No. I agree on Lesnar, Drew McIntyre, possibly Bobby Lashley. Maybe. Yeah. Because that would be a good fight in a lot of ways.
Yeah, sure. That'd be fun.
It'd be fun. Would it be, maybe at the Royal Rumble, you figure out how to throw Bobby Lashley with Roman Reigns, and that could be a fun Royal Rumble match into Mania.
Yeah.
That could be a fun one, and that could keep Drew off of, that. And then
Drew will win the Rumble. Drew's going to win the Rumble. I'm telling you that right now.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
I'll bet you $5 right now he wins the Rumble.
I'll bet you an ad on my show, and if there we go.
Come on, dude, $5. Just a $5 bet. I said $5 right now. Drew McIntyre is going to win the Rumble.
Fine. I'll happily take
$5? Yeah, like Drew McIntyre.
So if Drew doesn't, this isn't if Drew obviously he wins the Rumble if he's going to Mania, but if he doesn't win, he's going to Mania anyway.
So no. So here this is just a booking guess. You win. Basically, you win. He has to win the Rumble. Period. Right now, go away. So if he's in the card and he's in the Royal Rumble, then that's basically he has to get in the Rumble first. He's gonna win the Royal Rumble. He's their best choice to win the Rumble this year. It's not even close. You know I'm right too.
The only time you wouldn't be right is if Lesnar wins the Rumble and WWE just says we're going to run Lesnar and Roman Reigns at Mania, which they might do.
Which they might and that's the only other alternative they got. And honestly, all of us will be disappointed. I will give you my $5. I'll be like, and we'll both be sad about that. We'll both be sad about that. So
this is my whole thing is that WWE is known for disappointing people. They've been doing it for years, and they're going to continue. And obviously, they sort of know how to make us all disappointed. So we're going to see what happens in what is it? 47 days, I want to say, give or take.
Give or take, yeah. Like I said, I'm calling it right now. McIntyre wins the Rumble.
We should do a watch along.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, we should. We'll do it. We can totally do it. No, we can totally do it. And we'll watch the Rumble, and we'll talk about it and be like, and we'll do terrible commentary about stuff, and yeah.
We should do a whole card prediction before.
Well, sure. Okay. Only one condition. WWE has to have their full card in order to do the prediction. If they don't have a full,
I didn't say for money the card prediction.
No. I mean, you know, you're doing a prediction, like a prediction, the kind of thread about who wins and everything.
How the match is going to play out.
Yeah. You want like how I would book the Rumble this year? That'd be
interesting. No. When the card's announced, we'll just go through the card.
Yeah. My only condition is because WWE sometimes does things at the very last minute. If the full card is, if there's only like one match besides the Rumble, we'd be like, yeah, sure, right. But besides that, yeah, I'm in. All right. It's like
We'll just do it. It'll be an interesting Rumble for lack of a better word.
Yeah,
I'm not worrying about day one. That thing is going to be whatever. I'm going to watch it, but it's going to be a nightmare.
I haven't watched the WWE pay-per-view since. Actually, I haven't watched one since WrestleMania this year. They've bored me so much this year.
Hey, you know what it is? I enjoyed parts of Survivor Series, but
the
Roman Big E match was a good match.
Oh, sure. No. Their talent, like the talent they have on that roster is great. Legitimately speaking, and by the way, Charlotte and Becky was amazing. That was the best match on that card. It was an amazing match. But I watched that match because I was intrigued enough to watch that match. But the big problem, again, they from a storytelling perspective, I don't mind booking logically and fulfilling expectations, but there's a certain seat of the pants and certain like they don't seem to know what they're doing anymore. Aspects of the show, I
am so different. I think they know exactly what they're doing, and I think they're purposely disappointing everybody because they don't care because they know that they're not interested in disappointing their fans anymore, and for whatever reason, they don't want to give you what you want so that you come back, and then the next night or the next pay-per-view they give you what you want, and then they're playing like psychological three-dimensional chess with all of us.
There's something about like giving that like delaying that gratification, but I look at someone like Cesaro who should be much higher on the card than what he is, and I'm like, why isn't he? He doesn't need to be the world champion, but he should be treated like a big deal.
He should be the U.S. champ every once in a while. He should be the Intercontinental champion.
Or he should be the semi-main. Like that's what I think he should be. He should be the same. Like I watch him. I watch guys like Sheamus. I watch guys like Nakamura. Same thing. Should be higher up on that card than what he is. And like I said, I don't. And also, you can flip it. Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch are great main eventers. Charlotte Flair is a great main eventer sometimes, depending on how they book her character. But so treat those people like main events. You flip it around that way. But you should have a decent undercard. Like I said, like comparing this to AEW, the male roster on AEW has about 15 wrestlers who could be in the main event at any time. 15, right? They have another 15. They have another 15 who can go against the main event guys and beat them, and you're not shocked. Consequently, they can lose to the tier below them, and also it's not a shock. There's a sense that there are people on the card. You know who everybody is. You get a sense of their purpose, and everybody's over. On some level, everybody's over out there. So you have and you know who everybody is. I can't say that about the WWE product right now. So it's not quite WCW 2000, but it's WCW late '98. That's where they're at right now.
See, I think Vince knows what the fuck he's doing, and I think that he's playing us all for the fool. And
That
I
might
think
be true, but I ain't watching, so I guess he's the biggest fool of all.
so.
Yeah.
So I think WWE knows what they're doing. I think that they sort of are doing whatever they want to do because they don't really give a shit. And I think that they have a battle plan and they're following it through. Now, what that battle plan is, I have no idea. I own their stock, and their stock's done well for me. So I don't really care either because they're making me money. So what do I give a shit? Like,
That's fair, but I look at them and I just like at this particular point, I only have so much time in my day. I want to enjoy what I'm doing, right? And
so I don't watch Monday Night Raw. I don't watch
Okay.
SmackDown. I watch SmackDown 2 times a year. That's all I do. So I will watch
since after WrestleMania.
because I enjoy tribute to the troops.
Yeah,
I think
Oh,
tribute
for
to the
sure.
troops is the greatest thing that WWE's ever done.
it's up there. It's up there for sure.
It's that, and Vince's 9/11 speech was unbelievable.
My favorite thing WWE does is actually for sick kids having their wrestlers visit Make-A-Wishes. I think that's the best thing they do as a company.
That, and also the fact that they make the ring pink for breast cancer awareness is really good. And WWE is a very charitable organization.
But at the same point, like there's two sides to the WWE. There's the ruthless corporate side, and then there is some good in that company too. It's got its good points, it's got its bad points. But as it stands right this minute, product does not interest me like it should. And again, if I'm sounding like a disgruntled fan, I'm sorry, folks. I just again I have an alternative I can watch and enjoy. So I do.
And you're not even watching the good alternative either.
No.
You got to watch Beyond and GCW because that shit blows away.
GC is interesting. GC is nice once in a while. It's not every time for me.
It also gets expensive.
Yeah. So I look at them. They're a cool niche. Like that's why I look at them. They are a company that knows who they are. So they fulfill that niche.
They're a lot cooler than you think they are because they have JCW. Yes. And JCW is not deathmatch. And it's not the crazy GCW. It's like almost wrestling theater. And it's a whole different brand. But it's under like the GCW brand. It's like I don't know how to explain it. Like it's almost like I don't want to say it's the minor leagues, but it's also all the people who are not on a GCW show. So somebody like Billy Starks, for instance, is on JCW, or Charles Manson. No, not the Killer. I want to be before everybody gets all upset. Except Charles Manson comes out in a suit and he takes off his suit, and it's quite intoxicating. I'm just going to say it that way. But I digress right there. But GCW is really interesting, but I watch them maybe like 6 times a year because at $13 or $14 a pop, when you're a creator, and you don't have as much money as I would like to have, that's expensive.
My favorite stuff for the last 2 years has been prior to prior to AEW start, I really enjoyed New Japan. I really enjoyed the New Japan stuff of that era. That was my favorite stuff. And Japan hasn't been quite the same since the pandemic, but it is what it is. I enjoy AEW. I've enjoyed watching because I've been there kind of from the beginning. I've enjoyed the growth of it. Probably the best tag team division in the world is in that company right now. I enjoy that. They actually give a crap about tag teams. They put on a fun show. That's why I like them. They don't have to be the best thing out there, but it's a good thing. GCW is a niche, but a cool niche. They actually are very much, they are the closest thing to the old school ECW in the sense that ECW, for all the hardcore reputation it had, was a theater company. When you broke it right down, they were a theater company. And that's what GCW is. They're a theater company. And much like ECW then, I liked the old ECW product, but I didn't like it all the time. But I liked it in bits and spurts. That's where GCW is for me. It's in that I like it in spurts, but I don't like it all the time.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So enough about wrestling. I'm sure that you and me on Royal Rumble Day are going to be talking about this for 6 hours.
Yes.
No, we are not going to do a WrestleMania watch along. I swear to God, no, thank you.
No, dude, you'd have to pay me for that. I'm not doing that for free. Right? So, Rumble, I'll do. Royal Rumbles are fun. They're at least fun unless it's 2015. That wasn't fun. But besides that, Rumble, it was good. Rumbles are fun, right? So that's the thing there. Like they how do I put this? Rumbles are fun. I'd happily do a Royal Rumble. It's one of the only few things it's the only one of the few pay-per-views I will still pay for. Outside of that.
So you pay for this? You don't have Peacock?
No, dude, I don't watch television. Actually, funny story. It's a really funny story. A friend of mine from India did this like whole poll of all these shows on television that you've honestly watched on a regular basis. There's 90 shows on there. I watched 5. I haven't watched TV regularly in 10 years.
So like I'm weird in which I watched 2 shows. I watched 3 shows on television. I had Peacock and then I watched WWE. And so I watched their network and it's great. And I mean, I need my total bells. What can I say? Mm-hmm. You know, it's just the way I run. But I watch Yellowstone because Yellowstone's amazing as a show. Okay. And I watch Law & Order SVU and Law & Order Organized Crime. And that's it. That's the only 3 things I watch. And then I watch WWE Network. And then I watch a lot of anime. And then everything else that I watch is streaming. So, like, I'll watch, like, Beyond or, like, Freelance Underground, which is wrestling. But I'm not watching it on, like, television because it's a streaming service called IWTV, which is independent, wrestling television. So, for me, that's where I'm at. But, again, Peacock is $5 every single month. So it's $60 for the year, and for what I want to watch, it works.
Mm-hmm. So this is what I'm watching right now. My YouTube rabbit hole of choice right now, and this is gonna sound really bad, is Bar Rescue. I've enjoyed the concept of watching.
Shut it down, Josh. Shut this place down.
Yeah.
When I come back before, this whole bar better be cleaned up.
Yeah, no, it has its cool little tropes, but what I really like about that, what I've been watching about it, what I have watched about it in the last little bit is there's a lot of good business fundamentals that are always talked about, even in that show, in terms of leadership and how you go about and do things. And it's always fascinating to watch, right? Now, some of the ones he walks out on, you can totally see why. I don't think he's always fair with some of the things he does. But also at the same token, I also know some of that's television. I also can't argue with what they're doing and their success and everything they're coming out.
And also, you know what is? John Taffer's been wrong about maybe 10 times out of all the things he's done. And he was wrong on a name, for instance. Yeah. So, okay, you know what you can learn from that as a business? That sometimes somebody says, you change the cocktails, you change the food, you change the atmosphere. So somebody gets a name wrong. That happens, and what do you do when that happens? Doesn't mean the entire thing was a failure. It just means the name was a bad choice.
Oh, absolutely. No, I look at that show like it's a good I'm always fascinated with leadership stuff.
No. What I'm going with, and sorry to interrupt, is that what I'm trying to say is that if you are trying to build a business and you're watching that, I think people have to understand that failure is a scale. It is not a one thing failed, the entire thing fails. So if you pick a wrong name, for instance, on something, that doesn't mean, but everything else worked and you're 90% successful and you realize that you had to change the name of your company 2 years in. Well, that's not fun, but all the other things that you implemented were working. That's something that I learned from that episode. Because there was an episode where like he changed the bar to sort of a stupid name bar, but everything else in the bar worked. And it's very important sometimes for people to understand that mistakes happen in business and you just fix them and move on because the other things are working.
The other thing too is you got to understand this too. It's a collaboration, and his service is basically he's going to take a bar that's in debt. He goes in. From what I can tell, he buys the debt essentially. He helps you rebuild the image. You pay him back over a period of time. That feels like what he does. So he will. So what he's going to do, like again, usually the first half of the episode is him looking at the bar why it's failing. And then the second half of the episode is the things he likes about the concept of the bar, because usually, even when an idea doesn't fully work, there's good things that are in those ideas. My favorite remodel was the 5 nickel one, like the 555. I really like that one. That one's really good because it showed respect. Like he understood the value of that name. Like he wasn't crazy about that name either, but he understood the personal resonance it had with the owner. So he was able to. So he looked at that and said, "Okay, you get that, right? You get that. Not going to argue with you there. I understand why you want it this way, but we're going to change all of this." And sometimes that's the thing. Like when collaborations, there's a give and take, right? There's a give and take with everybody, and you have to be willing to give and take. My only thing with collaborations is the only I want is just people to be straight with me. If people are straight with me, we'll figure it out, right? And that's it. But like I said, that shows an interesting rabbit hole. I'm not sure I'm going to watch them all. I'm probably going to watch like a handful of those because the formula is the same. But I mean, I think what he does, some of the stuff he does there is kind of genius. The other thing I expose myself to a lot is I'm a big fan of Jocko Willmick's podcast. The one podcast I'm a really big fan of is his. I love the presentation of it. I think the whole thing is very smart. Jocko is a very smart, like I said, very perceptive way of how he presents himself. Very relatable. Very good business mind.
You will appreciate Chris Voss then, because Chris Voss. I don't know if you know who Chris Voss is. Chris Voss for 20 years was the FBI's lead hostage negotiator.
Yeah.
So he talks a lot about business and what people want and how to negotiate and how to understand what people want and get into sort of their heads. And, because once you understand what somebody wants, you can then, brokerage a deal. Or it's the idea that and he obviously, goes through training exercises, but he has a podcast and he does a lot of cool stuff.
Oh, I'll check it out.
Similar to Jocko's podcast, because I don't listen to every episode of Jocko, but when I do listen to Jocko, very, very useful information.
Good leadership stuff. I really enjoyed the military incompetence read along. That was fascinating to watch.
I was fortunate enough because I worked in 2 veteran organizations. I worked at the Veteran of Foreign Wars and I worked at Student Veterans. And I was interning at both of them when I was down in DC. And I left a really bad internship into that internship. And the best way I put it is that my old internship, I didn't have a key fob to get in and the lights were off when I entered the place where I was interning, the office. At Student Veterans, I had a key fob day one. Mm-hmm. And the lights were on every time I entered, or if they weren't on, they were motion activated. Big difference in how organizations are run. Sounds small, but it's a big difference. And tiny little things make a difference, because I felt like I was a member of the team, while at that other organization, I clearly wasn't an equal.
Yeah, A lot of relationships in general come down to little things, right? They start and end. Honestly, it starts and ends with communication and integrity. If you are open and you are very open about what you will do, what you won't do, and you're not giving excuses about it one way or the other, you can get away with pretty much anything. And I mean that not in the criminal sense, but people will give you a lot of leeway if they know where you stand. They really will. They won't. Every organization that I have worked for that's been good to me, I've been very open about my intentions. When I was working at the shipping company I'd worked with for nearly 10 years, it never was my priority. And they knew that up front. But at the same time, when I was there, I gave it my all, and they respected that. That was the trade-off. So it was and that might sound like a really simple thing to everybody listening, but honestly, like being open and honest with where you stand goes a long way with everybody you work with. If the biggest thing you got to be careful with, no matter what business you're in, is never mess with people's expectations of you. Right? If the moment you do that, that's when you will create problems. So try to be consistent. If you change your mind, just no excuses, just say what's going on. People will understand that kind of honesty. And that's the biggest thing I've learned in the last little while is, like I said, but that no one wants their time wasted. No one wants to feel you're unreliable. So don't.
There's a great saying where, one of the things in my world is that my word is golden, meaning that if I say I'm going to interview you and you say, get back to me in 3 months, on that day, you're going to get an email from me.
Yep.
If you say I'm busy till next year, it's in my calendar. Legitly, I will get a notification in my Hotmail that says, shoot so-and-so an email. And I'll say, you told me from a year from now to hit you up. And I've gotten interviews because somebody said nobody's ever done that before.
Oh, yeah, it's a little thing, but it's one of those. It's one of those things like you don't expect to hear back, but you're being honest. Again, it's one of those. It's one of those universal truths. Be consistent. Don't give any excuses. Don't justify it when things have to change. Just say what's going on, and people will respect you. And again, follow through. Keeping your promises goes a long way. I did a little contest on my Facebook page. Not really a contest, more like just I went to a bunch of indie authors. Pitch me someone else's book, and if I like your pitch for that other person, I'll buy that book and yours. So it was cool to see all the different pitches from so many different people. It was a wonderful experience to see, and I kept my word. Literally today, I had a whole bunch of books arrive because I'm a man of my word. Keeping promises, people remember that stuff.
I should have pitched somebody else's book. I have a perfect book to pitch, but I got super lazy. So
that's okay. I got 3 books. The person that won was also pitched at by another person, so I got their book too. So it was one of those like, oh, just get all 3. Yeah.
Well, I'll send you my book for free when I publish it in March. Some of my best writing, and then when we replay this and you get my book, you're gonna laugh. So
no, I'm not gonna laugh. I will take your book very seriously. I got a lot of stuff to actually.
Yes. You're gonna replay this too. You're gonna take my book very seriously. So I can't wait. This is gonna be right on the Kickstarter's campaign. I'm gonna cut this right out. Josh takes Andrew's book very seriously.
No, dude, look here. Truth. Okay, the absolute truth. Just straight up. You put a lot of effort into this. And it's something like I have interviewed. I've nearly interviewed 700 people. Good God. I have interviewed practically 700 people. Episode 698 was done earlier today. Everybody takes a serious effort to put something out there. It takes a lot of guts to do that.
Oh, it takes immense.
Oh yeah. So that's what I'm saying. When I say I'm taking it seriously, it's because you did. You published it. And I mean that, like you did. That's not me being. No, I'm taking it very seriously because you worked your ass off. This means something to you because guess what? You did it.
Right? Oh, it's gonna be a very, very, very interesting project. And I'm actually really excited to do it because I think a lot of good's going to come out of it. And I think people are going to be a little bit puzzled at first, but I think also it's going to be a very, very cool thing that people are going to appreciate for what I'm trying to do. It's more than just a comic. It's an idea, and it goes a little meta, if you will. I know, not the company. But I digress right there because we should wrap up because I have work tomorrow. So I actually have to do a presentation.
I have work tomorrow. I have work tomorrow too. I'm doing a lot of filming tomorrow, so it's going to be a very interesting day for me. So.
Well, I have to teach digital accessibility to my coworkers / training partners. So that's going to be super fun. And it's a really cool field, everybody, but it is complicated to say the least. And it is a frustrating field because it is complicated making things accessible. Which I appreciate. Your book is actually accessible, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yes. So do you want me to plug my book here as we wrap up?
I was about to ask. I was about to say, I'm going to give you a chance for self-promotion. I would ask you about comics, Kickstarter, COVID, but I think we pretty much covered all that. So where can people find you? Because obviously I put up the Amazon thing where people can pick it up digitally because it's right now only digitally available.
It's only digitally. Yep, it will be. So here's the bad news, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be digitally available to at least July. My artist is getting married, and there's some things I want to do for the physical book with her before I release it physically. But it will be out physically probably later next year. If you want to support me now, go on Amazon. You can also just read it on Kindle Unlimited. That will serve me just fine as well. I appreciate that. The link's there. My podcast is a 2018 Aurora Award winner, right? I have interviewed nearly 700 people. It's regularly features on Twitch, twitch.tv/justjoshingpodcast. Audio is available on virtually every platform you can find. It's everywhere. Give it a listen. We talk about everything from glitter to PTSD and everything in between you can possibly imagine. And that's it. I have talked to authors, other creators. I've talked to pro wrestlers, heavy metal bands. I've talked to comedians. I've talked to politicians. I've talked to sci-fi grandmasters, people just getting started. I do that. I do a regular show on myculture.ca. I host that with Sarah Stapchuk. You can do that every Thursday. I also am available for voiceover work, video work. I do commercials. I produce the video for the My Culture show. So I do video presentations as well. You can find me on my webpage, Pantalleresco, see how you spell that there, .wordpress.com, and you'll have everything I'm doing there.
So on that note, and I've been saying this, is you have to support indie. You have to support content creators, and the best way how to do that is actually buying their products and what they produce, whether you're buying a digital book, a physical book, you're buying both, you're supporting them at a con and all that stuff, because, well, that's how, content creators stay in business, is you actually physically buy things. And, well, that money goes into their wallet so they can live, eat, and also produce things further. But I get it. Money is tight. It is the holiday season. And if you are struggling or you are tight on money, I understand that, and I think a lot of people do as well. What you should be doing is supporting people on social media, such on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook pages. Also, obviously, check Josh out on Twitch, or anywhere where you listen to your podcasts, because obviously a listen goes a long way. Obviously, Josh has sponsors. So if you find a sponsor that suits you and you're interested in any of the products that he sponsors or has out there, you could definitely check that out. Also, Josh has a bunch of other stuff going on. I think you have a podcast class that people can check out, unless I'm mistaken on that. And if I am...
No, I should actually mention that. So I am teaching a podcasting course on the Speculative Fiction Academy. Those that do this will actually learn how to do an audio, a visual podcast, and as a little bonus, I actually show you guys how to make an audiobook. So
obviously that's out there as well. That's just another thing, but really checking people out on social media, subscribing to their podcasts. things like that go a long way. Obviously, for me, I am also a content creator. So I appreciate people who, like the Facebook page, check me out on YouTube. Obviously, that's Pop Anime Comics. On YouTube, it's Pop Anime Comics. On Facebook, I occasionally stream on Twitch as well. But I am rarely on Twitch when I'm speaking to comic people because I obviously stream in my group. You are more than welcome to join my group if you are a comic creator. That is Indie Comic Connect, and it's a free group to join, so anybody can join. Just answer those questions, and just don't post eBay links or porn, and you're all good. There are other groups on Facebook that are more than happy to have you there for those links. Also, again, I have my show. Please like it, check it out. Use my sponsors, mix them if you're printing books. Use my code BCW Supplies for your bags and boards. Again, type Pop Anime Comics in at checkout, coupon code 10% off. And I have Buy Me a Coffee, so that's up there as well. So if you still feel inclined, buy me a coffee. I appreciate it. It's like Patreon, but it's just not renewable every single time. And you could throw me some bones right there. I appreciate all support. And yeah, I just want people to actually like and share my video out and check out what I'm doing, what Josh is doing, because, well, we're not here without you guys as fans. And so on that note, I am going to give you the final word.
Well, first off, Andrew, thank you very much for having me on your show. I had a good time. We talked about a lot of everything. And much like
everything.
Yeah. Well, much like my show. I used to go anywhere and everywhere, right? So thank you so my book, Alice 1, I'm especially proud of. I really, really dug writing Alice, and I love writing Greek mythology. And I think you guys love that combination. It will rock. Kenzie Carr killed it in the illustrations she did in the book. They're amazing. I was really fortunate to work with her. The first book, Alice Zero, is nominated for an Elgin. So I promise you it's definitely a good time. And next year, you're going to see a lot more experimental work from yours truly. If you want to support me, listen to my podcast, buy my books, or if nothing else, share my work around. That would go a long way.
Well, on that note, that is a wrap.